And it's all yours.
Thank you, Ann.
You're welcome.
Okay, everyone, welcome back. This is day 2 of our 2-day board meeting, so I'd like to call this meeting to order. This meeting of the Board of Chiropractic Examiners is being held by teleconference pursuant to the statutory provisions of Government Code Section 11133. The date is Thursday, October 27th, 2022, and the time is 9:03 a.m. The board's paramount responsibility is to protect the health, welfare, and safety of the public through licensure, education, and enforcement in chiropractic care. Members of the public may address the board during the public comment section of today's meeting. Public comments will also be taken on agenda items at the time the item is heard and prior to the board taking any action on said items. Those who would like to provide public comment will be limited to 3 minutes, unless in the discretion of the board, circumstances require a longer period. Members of the public will not be permitted to yield their allotted time to other members of the public to make comments. Individuals may appear before the board to discuss items not on today's agenda. However, the board may not discuss or take action on these items except to decide whether to place the matter on the agenda of a future meeting. Please be aware that this meeting is being recorded and turn off or silence all cell phones. We will now take the roll call. Mr. Sweet, would you please call the roll?
Yes. Dr. Paris.
Present.
Dr. Adams.
Present.
Rafael Sweet. Present. Ms. Cruz.
Present.
Dr. Daniels.
Present.
Thank you, Mr. Sweet. We have a quorum. Moving to agenda item number 8. We are going to receive an update on the Department of Consumer Affairs by the DCA Office of Board and Bureaus. And at this time, I would ask Judy Bucciarelli, I hope I got that right, to provide an update on the Department of Consumer Affairs.
There. Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you, Judy.
Perfect. You know what? I'll put my camera on so you can see me. Figure out how to do that. Bear with me.
And this is the moderator. Down at the bottom, there should be a start video button right next to the mute and unmute button.
Can you see me now?
Not right now, no. If you've used joined by browser, that sometimes is an issue.
Okay, hold on just a moment. Okay, so I am in that box and it's showing a Dell monitor webcam. Do I need to click something different?
No, if you just click on the Dell monitor webcam and that's what you're using, it should work.
Yeah. You know, I covered a meeting last week and had the same issue, so we might not have that capability of seeing me, but if everyone's okay with that, I can just go ahead and read the update. Is that okay?
I think that's okay. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. All right, well, good morning. My name is Judy Bucciarelli, and I work in the DCA Executive Office and represent Board and Bureau Relations. And I'd like to thank you for allowing me the opportunity to provide the DCA update today. So this is scripted, so bear with me. I'm just going to be moving through 4 or 5 items to provide the update. So we'll start with new DCA staff. So we're very excited to announce that the governor has recently appointed a new Deputy Director of Board and Bureau Relations, Melissa Gear. She joined the department on October 3rd and brings a wealth of knowledge and experience. She previously served as the Chief Deputy Legislative Director at the Department of Insurance since 2014, and she has also served at the California State Teachers Retirement System, California Attorney General's Office, and the Legislative Analyst's Office. My next item is DCA Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Steering Committee. Director Kim Kirchmeier established the department's first Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Steering Committee to guide the department in its equity strategy, initiatives, and action plans. The DEI committee will hold its official kickoff meeting November 9th, 2022. Next item is strategic planning. In accordance with Governor Gavin Newsom's executive order, strategic plans in effect July 2023 and beyond must be developed or updated to more effectively advance equity and drive outcomes that increase opportunity for all. In response, DCA is revising its strategic planning processes to incorporate more inclusive public engagement, data analysis, and embedding diversity, equity, and inclusion into the strategic planning process. Over the coming months, the DEI committee will form the strategic planning processes. By March of 2023, DCA will begin implementing the revised processes and working with the boards in updating existing strategic plans or developing new strategic plans. Next in my update, I have a couple paragraphs about the Our Promise campaign. And it's that time of year again. DCA is excited to take part in Our Promise, California State Employees Giving at Work once more, and celebrate 65 years of caring for California. This year's Our Promise Vice Chair is Lourdes Castro Ramirez, Secretary of the Business, Consumer Services and Housing Agency, and our DCA Our Promise co-chairs are Chief Deputy Director Christine Lowley and Deputy Director Melissa Gear. The campaign will begin on October 1 and will end on December 31st. The campaign allows Californians to donate to a nonprofit or nonprofits of their choice. With your assistance, DCA hopes to continue its tradition of generosity and caring for our communities through this year's campaign. Please assist us in spreading the word and encouraging all members and staff to make a one-time donation or donate online through Cal Employee Connect. California can be cared for as little as $5 per month. And next, I want to touch on in-person meeting guidelines and COVID-19 safety measures. Though legislation has passed allowing remote meetings through June 30th, 2023, we are reminding boards that choose to hold in-person meetings of the safety measures, best practices, and recommendations for holding public meetings. When planning for upcoming meetings, please remember all board bureau members and staff are expected to follow the state and local public health guidelines that apply in the area where the meetings are held. Face coverings are strongly recommended for all board members and staff at meetings. The California Department of Public Health strongly recommends that individuals continue to mask in indoor settings. Please post face covering guidance signage at your meeting check-in or entrance. Next item would be for board member travel. As travel begins to pick up, it is important to remember that state travel arrangements must be made through DCA's approved travel agency, Cal Travel Store, or Concur. All board bureau members and staff must use the most economical fares possible when traveling by air on official state business. Typically, this will be the Southwest Want to Get Away option. However, there may be additional charges if changes are made to a flight. Flight changes to the date and time for personal convenience will not be approved or justified, and the traveler will be responsible for any associated charges. Additionally, AB 1887 prohibits state agencies, departments, boards, authorities, and commissions from traveling to states that are subject to California's travel ban. There are now 23 prohibited states. On the website of the Attorney General, you can view the entire list of states that are banned. Next item would be our partnership with the State Controller's Office. DCA will partner with State Controller's Office to share information with consumers and certain licensees about the Unclaimed Property Program. State law requires banks, insurance companies, corporations, and other entities to report and submit their customers' property to the State Controller's Office after a period of inactivity, generally 3 years. Certain DCA licensees will benefit from this partnership as it will educate them about their responsibility to report unclaimed property and assist with compliance. Additionally, the program is a great resource for all consumers to locate their unclaimed property. As always, DCA is here to help, and if there's anything that we can do to assist, please reach out to Melissa Gear, Deputy Director, Board and Bureau Relations. And that's the DCA update. Anyone have any questions that maybe I can answer or at least find the answer to? No? Okay, well, that concludes the update.
Thank you, Ms. Bucciarelli.
Oh, you're welcome.
Thank you. Any further discussion on the update from the Department of Consumer Affairs from the board members? Hearing none. Moderator, can you please open this agenda item for public comment?
Certainly. And we've opened up the WebEx Q&A option to facilitate public comment. If anyone has any comment on items addressed in the DCA update, you can look for the question mark icon, typically in the lower right of your computer screen or behind the 3-dot other options if you're on a mobile device, and click in the text box and type the word comment and send, and then we will call on people in the order received. The other option is for people to raise their hand by clicking on the hand icon. And if you are a call-in user, you can press *3 to raise your hand. We do ask people comment only once, and each person will be given 3 minutes to speak with a 30-second warning. And I do not see any requests for comment. Shall I close the Q&A feature?
Yes, please.
Thank you.
Okay. Moving on to agenda item number 9, board chair's report. You know, it's been a busy year, and seemingly October culminated a really productive and busy month. So I'll start with, we attended, Ms. Walker and I attended the Federation of Chiropractic Licensing Boards District 1 and District 4 2-day meeting, September 30th and October 1st. And then on October 1st, we also attended the California Chiropractic Roundtable meeting, which is hosted by the California Chiropractic Association. At the Federation of Chiropractic Licensing Board meeting, there were representatives from most of the chiropractic licensing boards in the western half of the country. And we received updates from Federation of Chiropractic Licensing Boards, the National Board of Chiropractic Examiners, on their programs and operations. And that entails things like spec exam and EBAS, the ethics and boundaries assessment tests, which have come up in some of our enforcement. So I think we had discussions about having them come and present back to our board so that we can better inform the public and kind of refresh all of our memories on the services they provide there. We also participated in multiple roundtable discussions with the other board members regarding licensing, continuing education, enforcement, and operational issues. At the California Chiropractic Roundtable, that roundtable, they've been doing this for a few years. It's been a really nice, and I'd like to publicly thank them for putting that on and hosting that. It's been a really nice event, and the roundtable consists of state association leadership, college presidents or their representatives, the Foundation for Chiropractic Progress, and we received updates from Life Chiropractic College West and Southern California University of Health Sciences on their DC programs. We also, California Chiropractic Association and the Foundation for Chiropractic Progress also shared updates on their recent activities. And so it's just a really nice, and I think it really ties into what we'll hear more about in our strategic plan and kind of our collaborative efforts. So thank you to the California Chiropractic Association for hosting that valuable meeting. And I think there's a lot to be learned at the FCLB, a lot to be shared. And so I hope that into the future, our board considers to attend those meetings. And so, very productive month. And I want to circle back and thank first the board members. Thank you so much for your hard work, your dedication, and the staff. Thank you for your hard work, your dedication. A very busy time for the board. If we look back to 2022, we started out with sunset review. We did strategic planning, and I think we kind of culminated that productive, efficient activity with, I think we had 5 meetings in a week a few weeks ago here. So thank you all for that. And I also would like to point out that, we've tried to improve our productivity, efficiency, and our communication with our stakeholders by planning our meetings well in advance. So if you look at the calendar, our board meetings are booked out to October 23rd, and we're making the same effort with the committees, which seemingly require a little bit more at times to be a little more flexible and nimble. So again, thank you to everyone for being that and doing that. It makes us productive. But yeah, we're booked out till next October. So to members of the public desiring to attend our meetings, and we hope you do, we're making an attempt to give you well advanced notice of those. And finally, we held very productive strategic planning sessions, as you're all aware. Started, I believe, back in March, and we had our actual sessions in August. And those were facilitated and guided by the Department of Consumer Affairs. Solid division, extremely helpful. I thought it went really well. And later in this meeting, under agenda item 20, we'll be reviewing the draft plan for possible adoption. And the plan really, one note there is the plan really outlines BCE's, our renewed focus on engagement and collaboration with our stakeholders. And that's all I have. So I would take any comments or discussion from the board members. Hearing none. Moderator, can we open this agenda item for public comment?
Certainly. And if anyone has any comments on the board chair's report, you may click on the question mark icon, type the word comment and click send, or you may raise your hand by clicking on the hand icon. Each person will have 3 minutes to speak. And I do not see any requests for public comment. Shall I close that feature?
Yes, please. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, moving to agenda item number 10, review and possible approval of board meeting minutes. The board meeting minutes from August 18, 19, 2022 and October 7th, 2022. They're in your packet, and I would ask for a motion to approve the minutes.
Motion to approve the minutes of August 18th and 19th, 2022, and October 7th, 2022.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. Is there any discussion by the board? Hearing none. Moderator, can you please open agenda item 10 for public comment?
Certainly. If any member of the public has a comment concerning the minutes, you may click on the question mark icon and type the word comment and click send, or raise your hand by clicking on the hand icon. Calling users may raise their hand by pressing *3. And I see no request for public comment. Shall I close that feature?
Yes, please. Thank you. If there is no further comment from the board or discussion, Mr. Sweet, I'd ask for the vote.
Dr. Paris.
Yes.
Dr. Adams.
Yes.
Raphael Sweet, yes. Ms. Cruz.
Yes.
Dr. Daniels.
Yes.
Thank you. Moving to agenda item 11, ratification, review and possible ratification of approved Doctor of Chiropractic license applications. Is there any discussion from the board members? Hearing none, I would entertain a motion to ratify the attached list of approved license applications.
This is Dr. Daniels. I make a motion to ratify the of approved Doctor of Chiropractic license applications.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. And moderator, would you please open agenda item 11 for public comment?
Certainly. If anyone has comments about the possible ratification of approved Doctor of Chiropractic license applications, you may press the question mark icon and type the word comment and click send, or you may raise your hand to make a comment, and each person will have 3 minutes to speak. And I see no requests for comment. Shall I close that feature?
Yes, please.
Thank you.
Mr. Sweet, would you please call the roll for the vote on that motion?
Of course. Dr. Paris.
Yes.
Dr. Adams.
Yes.
Raphael Sweet, yes. Ms. Cruz.
Yes.
Dr. Daniels.
Yes.
Motion passes. Thank you. Okay, moving to agenda item number 12. Review and possible ratification of approved continuing education applications. Are there any questions or discussion from the board members?
I had a quick question on the second page. On provider status, no box was checked. I'm not sure if that was, I would assume that this provider has a status. Provider Mark Algie, DC. from Ventura.
Yeah, good catch.
Dr. Paris? Or
Yes.
Dr. I'm sorry. This is Dixie. I did speak with this provider on the phone because he is currently a provider, but he wanted to change his name and in the future change to a corporate status. So right now he is an individual.
Has his application been amended outside of what's in this packet? Is that checked? Moving.
No.
Okay. Do we need him to resubmit?
We should probably ask for him to submit that
Okay.
so that we have it on our records.
Okay.
Then I move that we approve Mark Zuber's CE provider application and hold off or defer Mark Algae DC's application to a future meeting.
I would second that. Is there any discussion amongst the board? Hearing no further discussion, moderator, would you please open this for public comment?
Certainly. If anyone has any comment on the ratification of approved continuing education providers, you may click on the question mark icon in the lower right of your computer screen, or you may raise your hand by clicking on the hand icon. Each person will have 3 minutes to speak. And I see no requests for public comment. Shall I close that feature?
Yes, please.
Thank you.
Mr. Sweet, would you please call the roll for the vote on the motion?
Yes. Dr. Paris,
Yes.
Dr. Adams,
Yes.
Raphael Sweet, yes. Ms. Cruz,
Yeah.
Dr. Daniels.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion passes. Okay. Moving to agenda item 13, Executive Officers Report and Updates. Ms. Walker, would you please provide the report?
Sure. So my plan this morning is to provide a brief update, as many of the items that are typically within my portion of the report are actually going to be discussed later today during the committee reports and then also under other agenda items. Following my update this morning, I'm then going to turn it over to the department's budget office to provide a brief overview of our fund condition and some tips on kind of interpreting the document, and then we'll take questions on the budget. So kind of starting with my update, really what we've been focusing on since the last August board meeting has been the work that's gone through each of our committees. All 4 committees had very productive meetings this month. And staff's been working on all the action items that have come out of those meetings in preparation for presenting those various items and regulatory language to the committees at their next round of meetings in December. The other main focus this fall has really been on the business modernization project and our implementation of the Connect system. As the board members are aware, we've been working to enhance the user experience within the system, with a goal of increasing our system utilization rate. And to do that, we've been working on the various system requirements and documentation that's going to make the applicant and user dashboards a lot easier and more intuitive for our stakeholders to navigate, and also simplifying the renewal process for the DC license and the satellite applications. We're also creating a section on the dashboard where licensees can securely store their continuing education records in the system. And then staff will have access to those records for auditing purposes, thereby eliminating a lot of the back and forth paper process that we currently have for auditing. We've also developed where we can prominently display links to various BCE resources and contact information in plain view on the user's dashboard, so that if they're ever having any questions or they want to know what's going on at BCE, it's only a click away. We're also currently working to expand our cashiering functionality in the system. We have the ability to perform all transactions except renewals by paper check in the Connect system. So that's what they're working right now to implement for us. And that's kind of the driving factor of the next release, is aligning it with when that cashiering functionality is done. Right now, what we're projecting is that these enhancements are going to be ready to go in early December. And then once they're in place is when we're going to really be focusing heavily on getting the word out about the enhancements and just increased functionality available within that system, so we can hopefully get licensees to utilize that for their license renewals. The processing time within that system really just averages about 48 to 72 hours versus the paper-based process where it generally takes weeks to get a license renewal processed. So we're kind of continuing to really focus heavily on that system, and then we're going to be pushing to try to get more licensees to use it, and then we can look more long-term at potentially replacing our existing renewal applications that go out in the mail with instead maybe a postcard reminder, just letting licensees know to go online and renew, as other programs have been doing. Beyond enhancing that portion of the system, we are really working on the documentation and development of continuing education functionality in the system. We've already done some work on building out the CE provider registration process, though it's still held back in a test environment at this time. And then we're beginning the work on developing the course approval processes. And then from there, we want to create a front-facing list of all approved courses with the ability for users to actually use the system to search and locate courses based on title, course provider, and location. From there, the plan beyond that is to have the ability for CE providers to be able to directly upload their continuing education records into the system, thereby allowing for primary source verification of CE directly from the providers and practically eliminating the need for having to do the audit process that we currently do for CE records. Instead, we would get it directly from the source. All of these changes we're projecting out into later of 2023, but they are in development. Are there any questions from the board on the Connect project before I move on?
I have a quick question. I seem to recall it was noted we were having somewhat low utilization with the online system. Do we have any plans in place, anything where we might either market or advertise or influence our licensees to increase our utilization there?
So the plan or the thought behind it is that we're waiting until we get the system, the dashboard refined quite a bit, and then we want to get the word out. The issue we're encountering right now is that when you log into the system, it's not necessarily intuitive of where you need to click and what you need to do to renew your license. And we don't want to kind of guide people and then have them lost and then having to contact the board just for assistance. So there's some kind of quirks with the system where buttons only appear in certain times that we're now fixing that, and instead having the button be more prominently displayed and always there. And then if you're in circumstances where, say, you're not eligible for renewal, if you click the button, it'll just tell you in plain language, hey, your license is already valid through this date, return on or after, and giving them the specific time frame for them to complete their renewal. So those are kind of the things that once we have that fixed, we're going to really work on using our listserv and our social media, and probably include a flyer with the renewal applications that go out to licensees, letting them know of the new option that's quicker and it will be easier once we get it implemented.
And just to follow up to that, we had discussed during our strategic planning sessions, and I don't know if we directed staff specifically or, but we had discussed having some data returned on where our site visitors are going and the reasons for are we still working on that? And then actually the second part of that was to hopefully create those buttons, those hyperlinks as more prominent features on the, on the forward-facing web page.
Yes. So with that data, what we're doing, we're working with the department to get data on the usage of our website. And the plan is to actually bring that to the Government and Public Affairs Committee meeting in December for them to begin working on that. Because with that committee, we're working with them on enhancing our website content and our communication plans. And that's kind of the key background piece to get them started on that. So staff is gathering that and it'll be presented in December. And
that'll go to the committee and then they'll bring it back to us here.
Yes.
Okay, that's great. And I would agree that having just renewed this month, it's not extremely intuitive. So thank you for that.
Okay. As far as other real notable items with what staff's been doing, we've really been focusing our efforts on reviewing our existing various processes within the board. The licensing and continuing education units have been looking at their existing paper-based processes and trying to find areas where they can be made more efficient in preparation for future implementation in the Connect system, but then also just finding ways that we can really cut down on timeframes and better serve our consumers. And the enforcement unit actually had a more formal project going with the department's organizational improvement office, where they did an evaluation of the complaint intake, desk investigation, and field investigation processes. And through that project, we identified some strategies to improve productivity, reduce our timeframes, and then provide excellent customer service to those who are involved in our complaint process. So the recommendations that came from that project are expected to be implemented throughout the year. See. As far as the rest of my update as far as regulations, the majority of the regulations that we have that are pending have been discussed by the different committees or we're bringing back language. We did have a productive meeting with our regulatory council last month where we set some priorities and really developed a plan for moving most of these proposals forward. And we do plan to bring back quite a bit of language to committees at the December meetings to try to move things around. Of note, as we were going through the Consumer Protection Enforcement Initiative package, which was then split into a variety of proposals, we are finding a few areas where, although it's branded as an enforcement matter, they are more appropriate for licensing. So our plan is to likely take some of the workload off of enforcement and route some of those concepts through the licensing committee. So we'll be working with the chairs of each of the committees to kind of get that organization done and then get those proposals on some agendas. We're also working to resume our CE audits next month. We're going to begin with those who renewed in July of 2022, and we're going to go back 3 renewal cycles. That way we can capture the timeframe where we had temporarily paused audits just due to the various waivers that were in effect for continuing education. So we are going to be doing the audits, but it's not going to be the typical 1-year audit that we had been doing in the past. We're going to request all 3 years of data, recognizing that it's not going to fit solely within each of the calendar years as normal, given the waivers that are in effect. So we're getting ready to do that. And we're also working on releasing a recruitment announcement for our new expert consultants for the enforcement program. Let's see. Some other notes here. Looking at the statistics, there's the licensing trends in the packet. They're relatively steady from month to month. It's only representing at this point just 1 quarter of data for this fiscal year. Staff does want to work with the licensing committee to really enhance these statistics that are presented to the board so that we can provide some better metrics especially on our pending application workload and also our processing timeframes for these applications. As far as enforcement statistics, same, we're representing here the first quarter of the fiscal year. So far, we've received 126 complaints, which is right about on target with what we saw in the last 2 years. And then you'll note there's a much higher volume in years 18-19 and 19-20. That was due to continuing education audits. So without those audits accounted for, we're at about 500 complaints per year. The number of our pending complaints has grown a little bit since the end of the fiscal year. That's primarily due to efforts on that have been spent on our disciplinary cases. We've had quite a few of those adjudicated this last fall. We do expect that number to go back down as we head towards the end of the calendar year. And then looking at citations, I just wanted to note, because sometimes it can cause some confusion when we're looking at the citations issued and then our fines assessed and collected. The timeframes on those don't always line up, because in many cases we assess a fine, but we don't collect it until a subsequent fiscal year. So looking at the last fiscal year, we had issued 37 citations and assessed about $58,000 in fines and collect $37,000. Whereas this fiscal year, we've only assessed $8,500, but we've collected $17,000, and that's due to collections of the fines that were actually assessed last fiscal year. And as far as our disciplinary workload, it's starting to go down. We kind of peaked last fiscal year with a pending caseload of 107. We're now down to 88. That's a result of we had quite a few cases that were scheduled for hearing this fall. Many of them were resolved through stipulated settlements that have gone through the board mail vote process, but that is causing the reduction in that pending caseload. And then also within the enforcement report, there's kind of a chart on the complaints received. It's just 1 quarter of data, so it doesn't give us a lot, but it's kind of to be expected. We've received quite a number of non-jurisdictional complaints this first quarter of the fiscal year. Unlicensed practice, I just wanted to note, those are coded that way in cases where we have applications for restoration of license, and the licensee indicates that they had been practicing while their license was expired. That is unlicensed practice. We don't have 21 complaints against truly unlicensed people practicing chiropractic. It's mostly our licensees. And then followed beyond that, it's the 4 major complaint groups that usually actually result in discipline are trending the highest for this fiscal year. We have negligence and incompetence, sexual misconduct, arrest and conviction cases, and fraud. The accusations filed chart doesn't give a lot of meaningful data just because it's the first quarter of the year. Really, the most common violations within the accusations themselves are the ones that overlap regardless of what type of case it is. But really what that data just shows us is that the most common accusation that's been filed so far this year has been based on a criminal conviction that's substantially related to the practice. So are there any questions on any of the data within the report on the licensing or enforcement?
Can you just run through briefly again the unlicensed practice, what you had stated there, the 21 complaints?
Sure. Yeah. So of the 126 complaints that we've received in the first quarter of the fiscal year, 21 of them have been categorized as unlicensed practice. And I was just clarifying on that the majority of those 21 are actually complaints that have been internally generated based on a licensee that indicates on their restoration application that they had practiced while their license was expired or in forfeiture status, which then triggers an internal complaint and inquiry. So it's not that we have 21 purely unlicensed individuals. It's our licensees.
Understood. Thank you.
I'm not seeing any other questions. So with that, I would like to invite Sarah Hinkle and Karen Munoz from the department's budget office to provide an update on our budget and fund condition. And then moderator, if I could respectfully ask that you display the fund condition on the screen.
Thank you, Kristen. Good morning, everybody. My name is Sarah Hinkle, and I am here with my budget manager, Karen Munoz. I am the board's budget analyst at DCA, and I'm happy to be here to present the board's fund condition. Kristen's asked me to provide a high-level presentation on the fund condition and how to read and understand it. So So the fund condition that's displayed for you, this is a point in time document, and it's based on the 2022 Budget Act, and this includes 2021 prior year actuals, revenues and expenditures, and it also includes the proposed fee increases that are effective as of January 1st, 2023. So you can liken the fund condition to the board's checking account, and we read it from top to bottom and then from left to right. And there are 5 main points to the board's fund condition statement. The first is the beginning balance. And then the second section is the revenues. And the beginning balance this is a balance that is rolled over from prior year. We don't start from zero. And then the second section is the revenue. And this is what the board collects. And then following that is the expenditure section. This is what the board spends. And below that is the fund balance. And this is the amount of funds that remaining at the end of any given fiscal year, and is also the amount that's rolled over into next fiscal year. And then finally, the last part is the months in reserve. And this is the number of months that the board can sustain itself if no revenue was collected. So the board's fund has a statutory fund balance limit of 24 months, and typically 3 to 6 months is considered sufficient. So referencing to this fund condition, so the board began 2021-22 with a fund balance of $2,168,000, sorry, and collected the 4.5 million in revenues, and then spent 4.9 million in expenditures. And these include direct draws that leaving the ending balance of 1.75 million and 4.1 months in reserve. And for 2022-23 current year, so this includes the fee increases that begin January 1st, 2023, and the board projects revenues of 4.7 million. And since the fee increases start in the middle of the fiscal year, you can see the full cycle of how the fee increases impact the board during the 2023-24 fiscal year. The 22-23 current year expenditures are projected in full, and they're based on Budget Act at 4.6 million. And this amount, it will be updated throughout the year based on the fiscal month's projections that we receive. And we include a 3% growth in the budget year and ongoing columns. And this is to project for any future cost increases based on annual incremental adjustments, such as employee comp, retirement, and any general salary increase adjustments that we may receive. And so to the extent that the board does not fully expend its appropriation, any savings remaining in the board's fund, which will help the reserve balance. And at this time, we don't have any concerns with the board's fund. We'll continue to monitor the board's budget, and I'll continue to work with the board staff to provide monthly updates. So this completes my presentation, and I'm here to answer any questions.
So I have one question. The months in reserve seems to continue decline as we go forward, and I know you mentioned that it's between 3 and 6 months would be considered acceptable, and we're under 3 months starting in budget year 23-24. And is that projection is expected to change as we move forward?
Yes. these are, again, these are point in time documents, and that's also this fund condition, we project, or I'm sorry, we assume that we spend the full budget. And so this is, I mean, it's those months in reserve, they're in I would say, a comfortable spot. And it's just because, like I said, we project to the full amount that the board it has been appropriated for.
Okay.
Does that make sense? I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I just, at first glance, it appears that, the anticipation might be for some to see that, our months in reserve is, appears to be declining or anticipated to decline, but thank you for that.
And
You're welcome.
And I would say a comment and a question. So I think the comment, kind of looking at the the reserve, months in reserve, the assumption one, full budget is spent, but also the assumption two, there is no continued revenue, right? So I assume right, so it's kind of clarifying that. And I assume kind of on the back end, not what is necessarily shown here, but there is, let me see here, we don't show kind of any assumptions of payback of the kind of outstanding BRF loan, but we also, so wanted to add that as a kind of understood assumption. And I guess a question I have here is kind of seeing as though, I'm trying to find the right word for it. Which line item here represents, I would say, any of the legal fees related to potential settlements?
Are you referring to which revenue category that would be captured in? Is that what I'm understanding?
And maybe it is revenue. I wasn't sure, right? Because it's a combination of anything we receive, but also anything we would potentially lose out on. So maybe it's just understood as a sunk cost of things that we have to end up spending as a result of, I would say, escalated cases. I'm just wondering, with some of our conversations over the past few months, kind of where does that live in the balance sheet?
Hi, this is Munoz. I can actually answer that if you want me to, Sarah.
Yes, please.
Hi, Karen Munoz. I'm one of the budget analysts or budget managers. For any legal fees that come out, if there's any potential increases in any of those fees, that would usually come out of the expenditures of that year. If there are any settlements, that would come out of other items of the revenue, or depending on how it's paid out, it would come out of the appropriation of that year.
Okay. All right. I wasn't sure.
That is another reason why we do project to full expenditures in out years. It's for any of those uncertainties. Mm-hmm. And you are correct for the revenue. We do not project any increase in revenue after budget year, any increase of licensures or anything like that. And we do include the 3% increase, and that is why you see that decline in the fund condition. However, with historical savings that the board has been able to achieve each year, and the change in the fee structure, at this time with that decline, we're not concerned. We are expecting that to increase once we start doing projections and making any other adjustments to the revenues for future. So we're still working on updating the current year and budget year with incremental adjustments that you'll see when the governor's budget release in January. So I'm pretty sure you'll have a better understanding and updated of numbers in the next board meeting when these incremental adjustments become final in the governor's budget.
Thanks so much.
So that concludes the EO report, unless there's any other questions from the board members on any of the items.
I just have a comment. I want to commend you, Kristen, and your staff. That I think you hit the ground running, and I think it's been a good year. I echo the chair report where he said that we've done a lot of good things. I think we're getting a lot of good things going, and I think that has a great part due to your hitting the ground running in January. And just want to commend you for your efforts. And and the whole board, I think we've done a great job this year in really moving a lot of things forward that had been kind of languishing it appeared to me anyway, for quite some time. So I think your leadership, your direction has been stellar, and commend you for that.
Thank you. And I also echo your comments about the board members. You've all done a great job of really digging into the issues, kind of getting the background, and just kind of helping us forge a path forward. So thank you.
Yeah, I would echo Dr. Adams' comments also, and to the staff there too at the BCE office. Okay. Let's move on to agenda item. Oh, I'm sorry. Let's not. Moderator, can you open agenda item number 13 for public comment?
Certainly. If anyone has any comments on the executive officer's report, you may look for the question mark icon and then in the text box type comment and click send. The other option is to request to speak by raising your hand, and our call-in users can raise their hand by pressing *3. Each speaker will be given 3 minutes. And I see no request for comment. Shall I close that public comment feature?
Yes, please.
Thank you.
Moving to agenda item number 14, the licensing committee report. I would ask Dr. Daniels to provide us an update on the licensing committee.
Sure. Hi, this is Dr. Daniels. The licensing committee met on Monday, October 3rd, and we discussed Kaiser University out of Florida is wanting to apply for a new chiropractic college in California. And the staff reviewed the application, and what came out of that were 4 deficiencies. Physiology, in summary, basically physiology labs and true electives, 250 patient treatments, how much time was required to actually attend in class, and also clinical experience in psychological counseling. And so I think we have on the books a interview, hopefully at our next licensing committee, and Ms. Walker can confirm or not, to chat with the acting president, which is Dr. Jennifer Isles, about addressing the deficiencies. And in review, I think the one that might be most challenging is the 250 clinical hours. The other deficiencies perhaps are in their education, but they're not pulled out in the way that California recognizes them. And I did have a question for Ms. Walker that I can ask later that was not discussed, was if Life College and LACC are following certain California laws and regulations for our requirements, we need to discuss sort of how that's going to work as far as if someone is not exactly meeting the same requirements. So we are hopefully going to have an interview with Kaiser University and get more information on the deficiencies and seeing if we can move forward with an approval or not. We also discussed dealing with the matter of filing practice addresses, and there's some difficulty and challenges with mobile offices, vacation relief, and sporting events and fairs. And so how do we balance making sure that the licensees have a license that a stakeholder then can attach to that at any event and be protected. So some of the things that came out of that were possibly using a QR code where the patient can scan it, and that would lead them and attach the doctor to a place. But we do not currently in our regulations, we don't have a definition of quote unquote a place of practice. And so I think staff is working on creating the definitions for that. So that's kind of where we're starting, defining a place of practice and then moving from there, and how we deal with, I think a company called One Medical has multiple DCs that go to different places. So how do we keep track of the licensees? How do we be flexible enough for the licensees and the corporations, but how do we be diligent in having the stakeholders be able to know who has treated or seen them? One of my concerns for the stakeholders was, it says upon, if you ask, they'll show you your license, but a lot of people aren't comfortable with that. The staff also provided from 4 other boards what they do. I didn't find much help from those boards, so I feel like we sort of have to forge ahead and create our own, and that begins with defining the place of practice. We also discussed there's an open 60-day public comment for the CCE accreditation. And so the staff went through that and pulled out some of the highlights. Some of the concerns were, well, they're sort of moving from what's called an institutional type of organization to a programmatic, so that the institutions have the flexibility to continue with higher education without so many constraints. And so a lot of the examples, what's called examples of evidence, which are sort of more detailed nuances of what is required, are being pulled out into a guidance document. And the licensing board and staff had some concerns about having those pulled out into a separate document. And so I think staff was working on a response to CCE. The period for public comment ends on October 30th. Additionally, we were concerned with Metacompetency 1 and Metacompetency 2, and wanted to present to CCE a little bit more refined language. One of the phrases used by them is perform a case-appropriate examination, which I felt was a bit vague. And I feel that leads into some of the things that we see with our petitioners. Additionally, the emergency procedures is, to me, not clear when to adjust, when not to adjust. There wasn't enough clear language on that. So I think staff is working on language to present to CCE on sort of our suggestion on that. There was a public comment on concern about what is considered to get credit for those 250 hours. And there's 3 requirements that a patient treatment must include, which is a diagnostic procedure, an adjustive technique, and a patient evaluation. This person was concerned because they do a certain technique that showed that the person did not require an adjustment, and they're not getting any credit for that. And so I think I bring it up here because I think it feeds into the Metacompetency 2 with the CCE, as far as there's times to not adjust. And so the the licensing committee feels that there should be some credit given. So whether it's a third of a credit, you evaluate, you diagnose them, but you're not doing the adjustment. And to me, there's value in you don't always need to adjust. So that was one of the concerns. And there's been some conversation back and forth as far as where that falls with whether it's the CCE or with the board being able to change that conversation. And
Dr. Daniels?
yes.
I have a quick question. For clarification, I was curious about that when I saw that come through. So is that to say, like, when a person has their clinic requirement that they have to get their 250 outpatient adjustments, or the number I think is 350 can be student, and then 250 have to be outpatient? Are they saying that if an intern receives a patient into their student clinic and they're an intern working on those 250 or 300 visits that they have to satisfy the requirement, that if they do an evaluation and determine that an adjustment is not needed, that they don't get credit for that contact?
Correct. That's my understanding. And the way the point system, at least from what's been provided, it's a third of a point for each of those. And so, yes, if they don't adjust, they're not getting the credit. And I think that's a problem.
I concur.
So we did, I believe, and Ms. Walker can correct me if I'm wrong, I believe we put that on the agenda for the December 9th meeting. Because again, it falls into, I think, being pragmatic as a chiropractor, and you do not always adjust, and being safe and knowing when to and when not to. And so I think it gives the wrong message if we're not giving any credit for that patient, because it's patient interaction, not just the adjustment. So that is my understanding. I feel like there is one more point. Let me just look at my notes. Yeah, so a little bit more on the meta competency. It's identify indications, contraindications, and risk factors, and potential complications, but there's no specificity as far as emergency procedures and what you are actually looking for and how to proceed. And so it just seems a bit vague to me, and it seems to be what keeps coming up in some of the petitioner hearings. And there's also under the other portion, it says demonstrate knowledge of red flags, and reason. For me, I would add in reasons not to perform an adjustment. So those were some of the notes from the licensing committee. And I think that's all I have. So maybe Ms. Walker can confirm as far as the language for the CCE and the agenda item dealing with the credit for not adjusting.
Sure. So just the first one, the one that came about through the public comment during the committee meeting, that is scheduled to be placed on, or that will be on the agenda for the next licensing committee meeting in December. So staff is working with the stakeholder to present some background information and prepare for the licensing committee's discussion on that issue. For the CCE item here, the committee did, so the committee had their comments on the CCE accreditation standards. There were no comments on the residency program standards. And what we're doing here today is opening it for the other board members as well. If there was anything additional that we should maybe consider adding into our public comment submission, we're going to put that together based on the licensing committee's input, but then also if anything else comes about today, and then we'll get that submitted into CCE prior to the deadline.
Thank you.
Can I ask a couple questions? Thank you, Dr. Daniels. That was great. Very helpful for me. So I'm wondering if under the application for the Kaiser University College of Chiropractic Medicine, under number 3, was there any discussion as to the discrepancy between 80% of classes versus 90% of time?
Yeah, it was pulled out and we discussed it, but we have not had the opportunity to talk to Kaiser directly. And I think just from the bit that I know, there seems to be flexibility and that the other items are there. The one that might be the most challenging that they need to work on is the 250 patient visits that we require. So that is what I'm hoping that we'll discuss with them in the licensing committee meeting. We have the opportunity to have a conversation with them to get more clarity on it. And I just wanted to add, I know that they're a smaller school going through kind of the accreditation jumps and getting graduates out. And, it's always hard, whether it's a master's program or whatever, those first few cohorts. And so I know that there's people attending there that want to come back to California and are asking for, are they approved yet? So given our, the loss of Palmer College pretty soon and the decline in rates, I do think it's important to figure out a way to maintain a standard, but to bring them in and at least the approval so that those licensees can come back to California because they are asking. So I think it's just finding a way to get that done and making sure the standards are there.
Thank you. And in regards to the existing requirements for filing practice addresses with the board, just that general discussion, and I'm thinking events, and I know was there any discussion about like providing some sort of form, like an after visit summary or some sort of form post-treatment for patients that are treated at these sporting events, et cetera, as a way for them to go away with some sort of documentation in hand of maybe a brief summary of what was actually done to them for their further medical records, but then also as a ways that they can go away and have acknowledgement of, I saw this DC, they have this license, et cetera.
Yeah, no, it's a great idea. We didn't discuss that. We did discuss one of the ideas was that there was a QR code that was presented, and for people who didn't have a cell phone, there would be something else there that tied that chiropractor. I think the form is great. The only problem with that is, say I'm One Medical and I have a bunch of chiros, and I see maybe the DC forgets to put them on there and it's somebody else's name, or so I think we'll need to discuss and sort of navigate that as far as making sure the correct information is on there. You can see if you have 20 DCs and they're going all over the place, are they using making sure that they print their name and not sign their name and, all that. So, but yeah, I think it's a great idea. But making sure that that is able to be implemented is what I think we need to make sure that it's, again, flexible but reliable.
And so it seems like, did the discussion revolve around also then that those are seemingly two separate, like the more temporary, one-off events, sporting events, I've done homeless, events, things like that, versus the more expected, somewhat ongoing, like what that one medical had brought to us with the, where they already know they have a number of clinics, and they're really just trying to be able to fill in as needed. And so those seem like separate issues. Were they kind of separated in the discussion?
Yeah, and Ms. Walker can sort of confirm it for me. We were kind of thinking almost of three categories, the regular brick and mortar, and then what you're discussing, and then a mobile one. And so having that flexibility to address those different categories, the one-off, I'm just going to go cover for a doctor for a day. It's not a regular thing. And so, yes, that's been brought up, and Ms. Walker can confirm. Again, I think it came down to changing the regulatory definitions of a place of practice so that we could get those other definitions. But Ms. Walker can confirm if I have that right.
No, that sounds like a great idea.
Yeah, Dr. Daniels is correct. So as far as the discussion itself, we kind of started with the broad overview where we're looking at what else is out there with the other healing arts boards, and we didn't really find something that quite fit what we were thinking we would need for chiropractic. And then it really came down to as simple as we haven't yet defined what a place of practice is. So until we do that, it's hard to then establish the framework of where the regulatory line is. As far as when you talk about the more broad practices with multiple locations with different licensees at different locations, we were kind of drawing the parallel of if there's 5 locations and 5 DCs, you potentially have 25 satellite certificates out there. And if a member of the public goes on DCA search and looks up, say, One Medical, they don't find anything because there's nothing on record on that. They have to find the individual DCs. Whereas like looking at some other models where maybe you have like a location permit and then you attach everyone to it with the business name that you could just look it up and see everyone that works there. So that was kind of the different path, but we have to start with some definitions, then we can build from there.
Yeah, so it was sort of, again, I think the biggest picture, which I've said before, is creating flexibility for the licensees and corporations, right? So people want to work and it's easy, but also making sure that we are tying that person to something that is easy for them to find and that's reliable.
Yeah, thank you. These are really important issues, and thank you. It's good, good discussion. Committee's doing great work. And I would say too that it's not just One Medical. Just to acknowledge that on the call, we've had this brought to us in years past, even through VA providers where they've been looking to fill in different locations. So thank you for that. I have one more thing. I have one more quick question. And so on number 1 for the CCE comments, the proposed revisions, and they were going to take those examples of evidence, and they were going to be removed from the accreditation standards, but moved into a guidance document. They had some explanatory videos online and kind of reviewed the rationale behind why that is better placed in a guidance document versus actually in the accreditation standards. Was that not satisfactory to the committee, or what was our? Did we have further questions on that, or?
I think I reviewed all the videos as well, and I think we understood that. I think in application, I think staff had this similar concern as far as pulling those out and just what is it? I think our question really was, what is that going to look like specifically, and how is that going to be interpreted by the institution itself? We understood why. We don't think it's a negative. We just wanted to make sure that information didn't get lost and that it was attached to it. So I think our question was, what does that really look like practically? So when an institution goes and looks, oh, well, here, this is it, and the guidance document is in the back. So I think it was more of a practicality and making sure that information was relayed.
Okay, yeah, that's an important question. That's all I have. Thank you.
Do any of the other board members have any questions? So I think that's all I have for the licensing committee. And we meet again, I believe it's on December 9th.
Okay, if there's no more discussion from the board, then I would entertain a motion to submit the identified areas of interest as public comments to CCE as written.
Sabina, Dr. Paris, could you enumerate those a little bit more for the motion so we have a little bit more detail?
Do we need to do public comment?
After a motion and second, if you would like.
Yeah.
But once we figure out what the motion exactly is, that would be wonderful for our notes.
Well, the motion is to submit the areas of interest as noted in the packet.
On page 3, 1, 2, and 3, is that?
Page 3, 1, 2, and 3.
Perfect, of the memo, correct. Wonderful.
I'll second.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion from the board members? Hearing none, moderator, will you please open this agenda item for public comment?
Certainly. And we've opened up the Q&A feature of WebEx to facilitate public comment. If anyone would like to offer a comment on the licensing committee report, you may look for the question mark icon, type the word comment and click send, or you may raise your hand by pressing, by clicking on the icon, and call-in participants can raise their hand by pressing *3. And we do have one person with a hand raised. This is a call-in user from area code 510. And I've sent you a request to unmute your microphone. You should be able to click *6 to unmute yourself, and you'll have 3 minutes. You're unmuted.
Hi, can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Hi, my name is Falcon Lumont. I'm a student intern at Chiropractic College West. I have a public comment prepared for this teleconference if you would allow me to continue with it. The public comment is abridged from the previous written submission with minor edits for the BCE full board teleconference today. Section 331.12.2E states for clinic, each student shall be provided with actual clinical experience in examining, diagnosing, and treatment of patients. The section continues with detail for what clinical experience includes and the requirements needed to complete as a minimum for graduation. Section 331.12.2E2 states students shall perform a minimum of 250 patient treatment visits, including diagnostic procedures, chiropractic adjustive technique, and patient evaluation. The dilemma: a student will receive 0 points for the required 250 points for patient treatment visits for a patient encounter that provides no chiropractic adjustive technique applied on the patient, despite the student performing the required diagnostic procedures and evaluation needed to ascertain the data that directs against the chiropractic adjustment for that given instance. Nonetheless, these patients still comply and return for the next visit to check if the prior subluxation clearance held. I often tell my patients that after this instance, I cannot say if you will be subluxation free or not subluxation free. That is the inquiry that shall persist until your return. The section 331.12.2E2 BCE rules and regulation addendum request for remedy to the dilemma is this: if the diagnostic procedures and the patient evaluation performed I'm sorry, can you still hear me?
Yes.
The remedy is this: if the diagnostic procedures and the patient evaluation performed on a patient find that no subluxation is
30 seconds.
indicated, thereby canceling any subsequent chiropractic adjustive technique applied onto the patient, then the patient encounter is counted as a partial patient treatment visit, and the student should receive 1/3 of 1 point toward the minimum of 250 patient treatment visit points needed for graduation. Dr. Lauren Klum, Dean of Clinical Operations at the Life West Health Center, states that they will not, nor do they possess the authority to provide any point to any student intern for the patient
That
encounter
was 3 minutes.
that involves.
I would, if it's okay with the board members, I'd let him finish, please. Thank you.
Certainly. I'm sending you another request to unmute your microphone so you may finish your thought. And you can press *6 to unmute yourself. You're unmuted again.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Dr. Lauren Klum, Dean of Clinical Operations at the Life West Health Center, states that they will not, nor do they possess the authority to provide any point to any student intern for the patient encounter instance that involves only diagnostic procedures and the patient evaluation and does not involve the chiropractic adjustive technique. They maintain that any change to the point system must be held at the BCE level, and then only subsequently Life West will adopt and apply the rule in accordance with the BCE. Marcy Ramsey, Visit Process Manager of WASC Senior College and University Commission, states that their team members will receive communication via a confidential account provided to Life Chiropractic College West. They will not respond to this item individually. However, this information will be considered as their team undertakes its work and develops recommendations to the institution at Life West. S. Ray Bennett, Vice President for Accreditation and Operations of CCE, has indicated that the CCE need not be involved with the efforts made on the BCE Rules and Regulations addendum request. Therefore, communications with the CCE about this item may cease, and the licensing committee can proceed without the CCE. I've spoken with Amanda and Dixie from the licensing committee staff and will remain available for any preparation needed for the discussion on the agenda in December's teleconference. Being that I am only a student of chiropractic, and I do not yet have the license to practice. I am present here near Halloween and a Thanksgiving that arrives only after, with my pumpkin carved, lit with fire from a candle in servitude. And I beg to you, the Board of Chiropractic Examiners, staff, and Governor Gavin Newsom, I am not worthy to receive you. However, please only say the word and I shall be healed. Thank you.
And I see, thank you. No further requests for public comment at this time. Shall I close the public comment feature?
Yes, please. Thank you. And thank you for those public comments, and I commend you for being as active as involved as you are as a student. And we appreciate those, and I believe that was moved to an agenda item for that discussion previous. So, okay. And any further discussion from the board members? Hearing none, Mr. Sweet, would you please call the roll for the vote on the motion?
Yes. Dr. Paris?
Yes.
Dr. Adams?
Yes.
Raphael Sweet? Yes. Ms. Cruz?
Yes.
Dr. Daniels?
Yes.
And I would just ask, unless there's any objection from the board members or staff, that we could take a 10-minute break and come back at 10:41 and continue with agenda item 15. Okay, let's take a 10-minute break. We'll come back at 10:41. And it looks like we have everyone back. Okay. Okay, Hi, everyone. Welcome back. Let's move on to agenda item 15, Government and Public Affairs Committee report. And I'd ask Ms. Cruz to provide an update on Government and Public Affairs Committee.
Yes. So the Government and Public Affairs Committee met on October 4th, and kind of the different topics discussed was an update on legislation that I'll touch on, the kind of looking at the onboarding process for new board members, as well as kind of the ever always fun topic of records retention schedules. And we'll get into that. I'll actually be asking for an action leader in kind of in my update related to the records retention schedule. And so starting with legislation, there was kind of a couple of updates and just kind of note all of which were signed by the governor in September. So kind of we have understanding that these have already been signed off on. The first one, Assembly Bill 1102, specifically focusing on telephone medical advice services. The expectation there and kind of update there, or the expectation there is that anyone providing kind of medical advice services operating out of state must be licensed in the state they are providing advice to. So just kind of that's the update to bill. And actually, I'm going to definitely lean on Ms. Walker and staff to kind of help me expand on any of these if there's any questions. The next one, AB 1604, is related to civil service, a kind of Upward Mobility Act of 2022. It's kind of more of an internal kind of focused bill towards staff and really kind of how the different goals related to upward mobility are tracked and monitored. Next one is Senate Bill 731, for criminal records relief. This one, actually, I have a note here on this one, and it's it prohibits the record of a conviction for possession of specified controlled substances that's more than 5 years old, for which relief was granted, to be presented to a committee or being used to deny a credential. So relief there. The next one is SB 1237 related to licenses for military service. My understanding for that one is that there was a definition clarification related to called to active duty. And for the last one, something we're very familiar with, SB 1432. This one is actually connected to the specific topic around agenda item 19, but really related to our sunset review, telephone number and email address directory for licensees, our fee schedule, as well as, let me see here, what else is there? Actually, I'll leave that fun update for staff update later. But so all of those items were signed by the governor back in September. Moving on to our discussion related to the onboarding process for new board members. A couple things kind of came out of it, right? There was a focus on specific language that was part of the 2013 BCE strategic plan. And the discussion, at least as I recall, revolved around kind of how did we experience it? Is there specific language we want to update it? Much of the focus was kind of looking at what does that initial orientation look like? Because there is that orientation we have, right, with all the other board members that we all signed up on. I think for my experience, it was through a webinar, but specifically kind of with the executive officer and board staff, a combination, we're looking to kind of introduce a combination of a meet and greet in addition to a more structured orientation, right? That orientation would include not only the binder, but within the binder, including the different functions of staff, the regulations, related colleges and boards, so that kind of the new board member would get a kind of full picture of, I would say, who are involved and as well as what is involved. Another part of our discussion was that single point of contact as a fond memories of that first 2 months of joining the board. There was a number of deadlines, a number of forms, a number of trainings that had to be done, all of which kind of were coordinated by about 3 to 4 different folks coming from different parts of the kind of DC organization. So kind of the request there was to kind of have a single point of contact for new board members. And then that final portion I have here for my update is related to records retention. 3 main areas. Board meeting minutes. There is a recommendation from staff to change the records retention for board meeting minutes from 27 years to 100 years. And actually, Kristen, would you kind of be able to provide some background on that one? I was looking for my notes.
Sure, yeah. As far as, so for the board meeting minutes, that they contain the historical record of all of the board's business. So seeing that in the current records retention schedule, we were only specifying that those be completed for 27 years. We see that as problematic, given that that kind of establishes that not only the actions of the board, but then also you can see it through when we promulgate regulations or we take disciplinary actions. There's records of those various things within the minutes. So the staff recommendation on that is to increase it really to what's the maximum for what we can do with retention. And we want to go with 100 years, or that's our recommendation.
Yep. Thank you, Kristen. For kind of CE records, it was the staff recommendation was to increase it from 1 year to 5 years, and that will actually help align with the board's auditing period for licensees. So that way, kind of, I would say it would just really help with our efforts related to auditing. Then for disciplinary cases, increasing it from 25 to 75 years. Kind of one of the things kind of staff is seeing from my understanding is for a lot of the reinstatement requests that we're receiving, there's a lot of history beyond 25 years that they would have to go back to. And so this kind of similar to kind of the kind of CE records, kind of helping expand that window of retention kind of allows kind of staff more flexibility to go back to specific records. Any questions related to the update before I ask for a motion?
Yes, Ms. Cruz. I was just curious, and maybe this is Ms. Walker as well. So do we go back that far on the board meeting minutes? Have like the staff gone back and we just don't have what they need past the 27 years?
You know, off the top of my head, I don't have the exact answer to that. What I suspect is that we still have the document and we hadn't been purging it per the current schedule. And we would update it and want to keep it for the 100 years. The situation we're currently in is the retention schedule itself is expired. So we're in a position where we can't purge any records until we get that updated. And then we use that schedule to clear out some of our older records. And then for the ones that we're expanding on the time frame, we would be keeping.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I do have one more question, sorry. On the board member onboarding and orientation, I'm not sure if I'm clear, was the discussion that it was moving forward a mandatory in-person within 6 months, or was this done WebEx, or if you could just clarify for me?
Oh yeah, one of the kind of options we've kind of put it out there since we're now was to offer it virtually. So kind of give the offering, make it optional if in person works, if virtual works. So I know in the past, kind of in the language, expectation was in person, but we wanted to add that flexibility there.
But it was more reorganizing it to, besides the big one that we did, you know, with all the other boards, one specific to our board.
Exactly.
And then getting the board manual and et cetera.
Yeah.
I have just a comment or two and then a quick question. First of all, the onboarding and orientation, I love all of those ideas, especially the idea about just kind of assigning an existing board member to act as a member and point of contact, and doing that kind of upfront in advance. I will say this current board, I think we've been so collegial and such a good team. We've done that for each other on a number of issues and topics, and without having that formality. But I do think there is some comfort for a new board member in knowing that somebody's agreed and is willing and is assigned, and that's their role. So thank you for clarifying that. I want to just ask, so when we do 100 for meeting minutes, but we only do 75 for disciplinary case files, was there a rationale for that? Or, I mean, like, what I'm just inquisitive as to why they're not just both 100.
The 75-year recommendation was more based on a person's life expectancy and given time.
Are we being optimistic or pessimistic with that 75? Okay, thank you. Thank you. That's all I
have. Seeing there's no questions, I'd like to request a motion for, let me go back here. Request a motion to accept staff's recommendation for records retention update.
This is Sabina, if I may interrupt. I believe it's the committee's recommendation.
Oh, yes, sorry. It was staff's, now it's the committee's. So I would like to request a motion of the committee's recommendation for records retention schedule updates.
This is Dr. Daniels. I'll second.
Ms. Cruz, was that a motion, or were you requesting a motion?
Oh, I was requesting a motion. Sorry. Mm-hmm.
Dr. Daniels, would you like to make that motion?
I will. I thought she did it. Okay. So I move to make a motion to accept the board meeting minutes and the recommendations regarding proposed changes to the board's records retention schedule.
Right. I think it would just be, the motion would just concern the recommendation from the committee on the record retention schedule, not meeting minutes, I don't believe.
Okay. Yeah, that was included in there. Sorry. So I make a motion to adopt the recommendation regarding proposed changes to the board's records retention schedule.
I'll second.
Thank you. Would we like to put it out for comment? For public comment?
Can I
yeah.
Can I ask for a friendly amendment to the motion, and that the motion include the proposed changes to the meeting minutes, to retention for the meeting minutes for 100 years, but also include the continuing education records for 5 years and the disciplinary case files resulting in revoked or surrendered licenses for 75 years?
I thought that that was including all of them. The entire retention schedule included the 3 segments. No?
I don't know. I was just, the motion I only heard the retention for the meeting minutes, I think, in the motion. Maybe I need it read back.
This is Sabina. Either way, but whatever your pleasure is, if we're accepting the recommendation from the committee as it is presented, that would include all those 3 sub items. If you would like to make the motion more specific with every item, that is up to you as well.
If the original motion contained all 3 as recommended by the committee, then I will withdraw my friendly suggestion for a friendly amendment.
Great, then we just need public comment.
And this is the moderator, and we're opening the public comment feature of WebEx. If you would like to make a comment on the motion or the Government and Public Affairs Committee report, you may click on the question mark icon, type the word comment in the text box and click send, or you may raise your hand by pressing the hand icon. If you are a call-in user, you may press *3 to raise your hand. And I do not see any requests for comment at this time. Shall I close the public comment feature?
Yes, please.
Thank you.
And if there's any further discussion or comments from the board members? Hearing none, Mr. Sweet, will you please call the roll for the vote on the motion?
Yes. Dr. Paris?
Yes.
Dr. Adams?
Yes.
Raphael Sweet? Yes. Ms. Cruz?
Yes.
Dr. Daniels?
Yes.
Motion passes. Thank you. Okay. Moving to agenda item 16, Continuing Education Committee report. And that's me. So this is just an informational status update report. And the Continuing Education Committee has met twice. We met on 10/6, and then the agenda items, we didn't get through the full agenda, so we met again on 10/25 and completed the agenda items there. And I think there's three main issues that we've been discussing, and one was the repetition of continuing education courses. And so we were discussing how our current regulations don't restrict or prohibit a licensee from earning CE credit multiple times by repeating a course. And the committee directed staff to develop proposed language that will prevent licensees from receiving CE credit for repeated courses within a single renewal cycle. And that will be reviewed and discussed at a further meeting. And then we also recommended that the enforcement committee discuss limiting the repetition of CE courses by petitioners, and that the licensing committee evaluate the requirements for the restoration of a license in forfeiture or cancel status. And that conversation was really around having multiple years, many years, sometimes decade of CE potentially to make up, and that perhaps there were more appropriate assurances of safety that we could initiate versus the CE itself. So, and Ms. Walker, anything to clarify on that particular point?
No, you've got it there. So we have the piece for CE specifically, but there are the two action items going out to licensing and enforcement committee that we'll discuss with those chairs.
Thank you. The second was we reviewed the summary of the proposed annual CE requirements that have been in discussion for some time. And the committee had determined that the coursework in competency 1, which was evaluation and management, and competency 3, adjustment technique or manipulation, we determined that those must be completed in person, or we discussed that those must be completed in person or through a live and interactive course given via electronic means. And so we have also directed staff to develop proposed language to amend CCR Title 16, Section 361 to reflect the updated requirements developed by the committee. And those will also be discussed at a future meeting. Ms. Walker, anything to add to that?
No, not on that item.
Thank you. And then the third thing that's been in discussion is the proposed changes to the board's CE course review and approval process. And that included a potential renewal process for previously approved courses. We've gotten a lot of feedback from stakeholders and CE providers on this issue. And the issue really is that courses that have been previously reviewed and approved by the board that we could have a separate and much more expedient process for continuing those renewals. And I don't recall, did we direct staff to develop language around that?
Correct. Yes, staff is going to put together a few different proposals for the committee to review at the next meeting.
Yeah, and so the committee will come back and review some language around making some efficiencies, I believe, and we also had some discussion about length of time there, and it revolved around essentially having these approvals be for 3 years, and of course there still would be some attestation or self-certification that the course is still being taught and it's still the same outline and subject matter and instructor, et cetera. But so that language will come back, and we will review that again at a future CE meeting, and eventually hopefully lands here with the full board. And I would take any questions or discussion from the board.
Dr. Paris, was there more conversation on the CE provider fees? That it is going to take effect in January?
Particularly on that call, we did discuss, there was some discussion that would be a separate, the renewal and the 3-year, and just having that more simplified review process of the existing courses, that would be a lower, we would establish a lower fee for that.
And I think in the conversation was streamlining what the providers provide to staff as far as what qualifies for what section of the CE. That makes sense. Kind of if it falls into ethics or anatomy, physiology, clinical exam. I think staff spends, from my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, an inordinate amount of time figuring that out. So was there conversation around that?
There was some discussion around, some other, the regulations around the mandated CE items, and that those would be, have a more thorough review, and that the other 14 continuing education credits, that those wouldn't have as thorough of a review. And the rationale for that was essentially that we accept from other healing arts boards, and we accept, so those would not have as thorough of the review as the proposed 10 mandated hours.
If I might add also, just for clarification, that the elective section is what you're referring to, non-mandated. But we did have a discussion, and it kind of came out of also your recommendations in your notes, and I think what you're getting at, Dr. Daniels, is the idea that the providers, when they submit their courses, need to be clearer. And as we define the competencies or the sections that are mandated, as we get clear about what's required, then the providers, when they submit their course for approval, will designate what hours fall into what mandated category, and will substantiate that. So the onus, instead of it being on staff to try to figure out where stuff's going to get placed, the providers are going to delineate that out, so that if they submit a 6 or a 12, what specific hours are, or what particular competency they fall under, and what falls under elective, as opposed to shifting that to staff.
Correct. Thank you for the clarification. And I just feel like that will save money for the provider significantly if it's clear. So I think that's the goal, is, controlling those costs for them, as well as making it understandable and and for the staff.
Yeah, and thank you for that, Dr. Adams, and for that question. I think historically too, we had gone from really not very well defined competencies and objectives and there was a push or a move to kind of try and figure out how best to align these, and they kind of circled around the CCE standards and the competencies contained there as kind of the, something we know that all DCs obtain as competencies. And those were translated maybe a little bit too literally. And I think that's when it got really granular and kind of confusing. And I take most of the blame for that. And so I think now that we've kind of loosened up the definitions there, and the mandated CE competencies still generally, align with some of what the CCE competencies might be anyway. And so I think, and then perhaps there might be some further discussion, and I'm glad you brought it up. It might be an agenda item as to the broader competencies that might fall into the electives. And those, I think, my opinion still is that, and this would be good discussion for the committee, perhaps, that those broader, competencies should remain broad, just for that reasons that we mentioned earlier, that we accept a lot of CE from other healing arts boards and other areas, and we just want to kind of generally capture that. Yeah, thank you for that question. Is there any more discussion or comments from the board on this agenda item?
I just had one more question on where the board was at with the requirement for CPR. I think that was a conversation or just on the discussion.
Yeah, I don't know that we've discussed that at the last two CE committee meetings, but Ms. Walker, do you want to give us
I was just curious if it was going to be on an agenda or coming up, because it was documented in our notes as something that had been mentioned in the past. But I know it wasn't talked about the last two meetings. I just didn't want to lose track of where we were.
Correct. Yeah. So the CPR mandate for license renewals, that concept came about quite a few years ago as they were kind of initially developing the different changes to CE. So it's still been kind of on the horizon, but the focus has really been on setting the framework for the providers, and then now we've really moved into the course applications. That item will end up circling back to the CE committee in the form of final language for approval.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for asking about that. I think the one thing that that will be a consideration when we get there too is that most CPR certification is biannual, or you get 2-year certification. So just, I don't know, just on top of my head, we need to think about that when we write the language. But anything else from board members? Okay, hearing none. Moderator, can you open agenda item 16 for public comment?
Certainly. If anyone would like to make a comment on the Continuing Education Committee report, you can look for the question mark icon in the lower right of your screen, type the word comment and click send, or you may raise your hand by pressing the hand icon, and call-in users can press *3 to raise their hand. We do have a request for comment from someone logged into WebEx as ML. I'm going to send you a request to unmute your microphone, and you'll have 3 minutes. And you're unmuted.
Hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. This is regarding, sorry, this is my first time speaking. My question is, what are your educational mandates for harassment, sexual misconduct training? If so, how often and of what type of training? That's my question for the educational.
Okay, thank you. Shall I move to the next request for comment?
Yes, please.
Thank you. We have a request from someone logged into WebEx as Marcus Strutz. And Marcus, I'm going to send you a request to unmute your microphone and you will have 3 minutes. And you're unmuted.
Clarification on the application procedure itself. Is this going to be an item that is going to be pulled out, much like you folks did on April 22nd for Zoom, and prioritize it to push it through versus having this bundled together with the competencies and all the other particulars of the CE, because I know that's going to take a bit more time. My understanding, because of the cost effect that's going to happen January 1st, that this was going to be an item that was going to be pulled separately and attempted to be pushed through quicker. I just wanted a confirmation of that. And my second question was a little unclear on the discussion from Tuesday. If a new application for a new course was going to be the $116 per hour, and then once that was pushed through, then after year 3, which is year 4, then it would be under a new procedure, which would be less than $116 per hour, some reduced fee because it's a course that's been approved over and over and over again. And the question I had after that, if that's not correct, is what is correct? And then if I am correct, what I thought I heard, would that then be the following 3 years and the following 3 years and follow along? So I just wanted some clarification on that. So, all right, thank you very much.
And I see no further request for comment at this time. Shall I close the public comment features?
Yes, please.
Thank you.
Well, I'd like to thank both public comments, both members of the public for their comments. And we are not allowed to take items that are not on the agenda, but we will have staff reach out to both of you to contact you offline in regards to your questions. And for those items that would be appropriate for future committee meetings or future board meetings, we can discuss that down the road. Thank you. And I think looking at the agenda, unless there's objection from the board, if it's okay, I'd like to take agenda item 18 out of order, only because it somewhat relates to the continuing education. Well, actually, it does relate to continuing education. And then we'll come back to 17 after that. Is there any objection to taking those out of order? Hearing no objection, moving on to agenda item 18, I would ask Ms. Walker to provide the staff report on this agenda item.
Sure, thank you. So as the board recalls, at the April meeting, the board had adopted some proposed regulatory language to amend California Code of Regulations, Title 16, Sections 363 and 363.1, and directed staff to initiate the rulemaking process. Through this proposal, what the board is seeking to do is to clearly define the 3 learning formats for approved CE courses. Those have been defined as an in-person learning experience, a live and interactive course given via electronic means, and distance learning. And then through that proposal, the definition of distance learning has been narrowed to asynchronous coursework, which thereby allows the courses that are delivered either in person or through that live or interactive experience to have the same standing as a traditional in-person learning environment that we currently have, with the exception of chiropractic adjustive or manipulation techniques, which under that proposal must be completed in person. So staff had been developing the rulemaking package to implement this proposal and encountered, well, one issue is with the course application form itself, which is incorporated by reference in section 363. That simply needs to be updated for consistency with the proposed text within the regulation. The other item is at the October CE committee meeting, based on the committee's most recent discussions of the topic, committee, although under this proposal, we're looking at the current subject areas. Looking further down the line, the committee has been talking about competency 1 and 3 being acceptable either in person or through the live or interactive video conferencing type courses. So we have a little bit of kind of a consistency issue if that ends up being down the line, yet we proceed with the strictly in person in this proposal. So those are really the two kind of items that directly need to be discussed today by the board. We have some language that's updated that we could put forward, as well as an updated application that's, pretty much just taking the same version from 2010 and just making very minor modifications to reflect this language. But actually, for this item itself, the staff recommendation is a little bit different. What the staff recommendation on this is actually to take this proposal and refer it back to the Continuing Education Committee to develop proposed language to not only implement these concepts, but then also the new competency areas, the methods for earning the CE credit, the new course approval process, and the potential renewal process that was discussed by the committee. And we make this recommendation to the board for really three main reasons. The CE committee has made some substantial progress in establishing the framework for the CE courses. And we're concerned that if we proceed with the smaller package, we may potentially overlap with the more substantial updates that are just about immediately to follow with this package. The second reason is we are coming up on timelines, specifically we do have the new fee schedule becomes effective January 1st, 2023. So the potential of a renewal process and the implementation time involved in a regulatory package kind of, it creates a sense of urgency to kind of address that issue on top of what we have here in this proposal. And then we're also hitting a time frame for us to develop the CE functionality within the Connect system. So we really need to kind of establish the framework so that when we're building the functionality within the system, we can build something that's going to not only meet our needs today, but then also where the board's heading within the next few years, so that we don't need to then turn around and create another contract with more money involved in updating the existing functionality. And then the third, just another third item for consideration before the board is that the department has also established a CE working group, and they've drafted some proposed regulations on continuing education and some of the requirements. And those, after affected, those would affect all of the boards and bureaus within DCA. So we have the draft language, and what we want to do is work with the committee to make sure that we've incorporated all of the elements in the department's draft language into the board's draft language. So all that to say, really at this point, we have two options today. We can present you with some proposed language to simply move forward with this very small package, or we are open to kind of the staff recommendation on this is to instead send this back to the Continuing Education Committee to develop a proposal solely on the CE courses. So not with the other items that have been discussed relating to the provider application and approval and renewal process, but simply with the courses, the different framework, and then bring that back eventually to the board, or not even eventually, at the next board meeting for discussion on that regulatory proposal.
Is there any discussion or questions from the board members?
A question, in bringing it, in voting to bring it back until the next board meeting, does that still grant staff enough time to kind of put the framework together and implement any changes kind of internally that needs to happen?
We believe so. So we've taken quite a few notes from both of the committee meeting discussions, and we're going to be drafting that next week and getting it to legal so that we can get something that not only just one proposal, but a few options before the committee at the next committee meeting in December.
Okay.
So I guess from my perspective, I felt like, I just feel like this seems to just keep getting brought back up when it was decided. I guess I felt like there was a decision made in April 22nd that we came together on, that we have 2 tracks going, but because things now we're converging. And so I think the idea was to get this going, because the idea was out this simpler thing, because it would be able to move through the OAL faster as a single item. Whereas now we're talking about not doing that. We're going to delay it even more, put it into the comprehensive package, which could take even longer. And then we're still not addressing. So I feel like, my feeling is, we've had this regulatory language that we agreed on, adopted, voted on in April, that somehow still has not gotten to the proper channels to get a decision made. And I feel like I guess I don't understand. I guess I feel like when we vote on something, we have the language. I guess I thought it's supposed to get in there so it can start the grinding process, but it sounds like we're not even at the grinding process. Now we're talking about pulling it out. So I guess my feeling is that I think we need to move forward. If we haven't actually submitted it yet, and we've already decided that as a continuing education committee that we've defined that we're now going to say that live interaction and the issue of technique has been decided that they can do that either in person or through live interaction. And then in our comprehensive package, we're adding the evaluation and management competency once it goes, that we need those to be in person or in live interaction and not distance learning. Why can't we, if we haven't stated that, just move this forward, add the new language that a person can do technique, via, strike that one section and then vote on it now so that it can get the process started. And then we'll, because I think if though we have the intention for the comprehensive and it's moving along, we don't know what sticking points we're going to get as we start to define things. And all that could do is potentially put this off even further. And we could be a year before we get that language. And then a year or, however long it takes to go through the OAL. So I just feel like this issue, I thought was moved forward. So that's my feeling. I think we move it forward and do our comprehensive stuff as well. So that's my 2 cents.
Ms. Falker, I'm not sure I heard you correctly. What I thought I heard was there was some language that was just determined or a concept that was agreed upon earlier in the year, and then recently the committee wanted to add that competency 1 and 3 could be either live interactive or in person, but not asynchronous. And so what I heard you say is that there's some problem with the language of what was defined before as distance learning and where those categories fell into. Is that what you're saying?
There's no issue with the definition. We're now in a position where, assuming, and that's, it still would require a full board vote, but at the time that this language was drafted, it had the requirement that technique be solely in person. Whereas right now, you can complete technique courses through any means, even distance learning and sitting there clicking through slides. So with this proposal, if we move forward with the language exactly as drafted, we're going to be in the position of having to justify why it's necessary for it to be solely in person, just to potentially turn around a few months later to do another package to say, well, now technique can be in person or through a live or interactive experience. So we don't want to take it from there's no restriction to then very narrowly defining it and then opening it back up again. We'd like to make that move once. So as far as kind of also in response to Dr. Adams' points, there's a few options. We can settle kind of that issue today and then make with the updates to the application and move forward solely on that. My major concern behind that is just timeframes, given kind of the committee's interest in moving forward with the framework that's been kind of discussed for a while now. If we put forward one package and then we're trying to kind of change something right behind it, we're going to be kind of overlapping and it's going to be more of a problem. I think we get more of what we want by returning it to the committee to just get it right the first time through one detailed package. It's just that's where the staff recommendation is coming from. We can do it either way. It's just the concern with the fee increase going into effect, and then the potential solution to that is also going to affect the language in 363. So if we have one package that's already trying to amend 363, and then we want to try to do something again to amend 363 and 361, we're going to have problems. And there's also the other piece to it is with the simplified competency areas, especially with competency 5 of electives, that really will free up the staff time when we're reviewing and processing applications, because we won't be trying to pick from the 18 different categories that are currently in regulation. So that's the thought behind it. It's just we can go either way, but that's just what we're bringing today for the board to make a decision on.
Thank you. To me, it makes more sense to try and get it done correctly, but, addressing Dr. Adams' frustration about, the delay, how do both happen? How can we, expedite and get the more complete package done and get it moving through versus potential delays? Because if what you say is true, we get one package and then we got to go back and turn it around and change it again. That doesn't seem efficient. But addressing that part of this was decided a while ago, and addressing Dr. Adams' frustration, how do we put those two together?
Right. And I fully recognize and kind of share the frustration there. I completely understand. With the package that we have, the major sticking point is it's the change to the application, but it's just recognizing that the committee's done quite a bit more work, I would say, in the last 3 weeks than had been accomplished in a year of discussion. So I think we're getting there and at a good pace, and that's why the recommendation is to kind of continue that forward, establish the framework that will work for not only the board, but the CE providers and licensees, and just move that forward. We aren't trying to do the full comprehensive here with some of the different concepts that aren't immediately needed. It's more to focus it on the course subject areas or competencies, how you earn credit, and then what the approval and renewal process will be, including what the associated fees would be. So we're not trying to go back to the full comprehensive update of touching every CE regulation, but instead narrowly or not, focus it solely on the course itself.
Yeah, I think my preference would be, and I understand this has been a long, it is a long process. I don't think there was a way for us to make it a short process. So, but I would really be hesitant to have us move forward knowing that we'd have some inconsistencies or even conflicting language. It sounds like, and then have to come back and change it again later. I agree. We've done so much in the committee, even so much that, as noted here, on October 6th, we were at the continuing education meeting. We were still giving further direction as to the language, and I think we improved it. I think that was one of the desires, was to have that change occur, and that's what we heard from our stakeholders. And I think some of the board member positions were that we allow those, the technique to be completed in person or through live and interactive courses via electronic means. And so I think that we're accomplishing, I think, what the board, agreed with there. And I would just like to see us clean it up and have it, in my view, done as right as we can make it, right now. And I don't think it doesn't seem like it's going to be delayed that much. I mean, I think we could kind of try and predict, the future problems maybe, but I think it's moving fairly quickly as is. And I actually think this is kind of the good catch things that, coming from staff recommendations that just make this consistent and so that we're only doing it this one time. So I appreciate the comments and I think having this, all done correctly and as mentioned, and aligning it with, changing the application and getting the language consistent now. I would support the recommendation from staff.
Do we have kind of more of a specific time frame of the, going with getting it right the first time, something more substantial that we can see it coming to fruition?
So the staff proposed timeframe would be to work immediately with legal counsel to kind of gather up the framework that's been discussed to this point by the committee, as well as some of the different proposals that we had been directed to bring back. So the idea is to bring it to December, and likely we would, if we go forward with returning this item to the committee, bring it forward to the December meeting, but then also work to schedule a second committee meeting if needed in early January, with the idea of being able to bring something substantial back to the board in January, at the January 20th meeting, if possible. So there's a delay, but we're not trying to cause a significant delay. We're just trying to kind of correct the course.
Well, I definitely would be open to adding another committee meeting in early January so that we were, guaranteed that this package is being brought back to the board. That I think it's January 20th, to not cause much more of a delay.
I would also be open to that. Is there any further discussion or comments from the board members? Is there a motion from the board on this agenda item?
This is Sabina. Kristen, were you expecting a motion for the staff just to keep on working and bring language back? I'm not sure which one is necessarily needed.
Sabina, it's something I would ask you for clarification on. We had the prior direction from the board to proceed with a package solely on these two sections. What the staff recommendation is to have the matter go back to the CE committee for staff to work with that committee on a proposal that addresses the CE courses. So if a motion is needed to return the item to the committee, then that's what we'd be seeking. If no motion is necessary, then that would be okay too.
I'll defer to the president. Either way is fine with me. The staff's going to continue to work on the language anyway.
Just for the record, I would make a motion that the staff return this to the committee as proposed.
So let me just get clarity then. So what we did in April is now being negated, and we're essentially going right back to where we were, where we're going to do the comprehensive review. We're just going to do it all together and as we were originally. Just wrapping it all into one thing, not pulling this one item out to expedite things as we are under the impression could be done rather simply. Now we are scrapping what we voted on in April and just going back to the comprehensive review and doing it all in one fell swoop. Is that the understanding I'm getting?
No, Dr. Adams, I'd like to clarify. So the work to date on this language would remain. We're just looking to supplement it with some of the other concepts that the committee has already discussed. So we're not going back to the beginning, and we're also not trying to pursue one comprehensive proposal. It'll likely be 2 or 3. So this will be focused on the CE courses themselves and that associated framework. So the course subject areas, competencies, which the committee has discussed, the methods of how you earn continuing education credit, which has also been discussed, and then the application process, including an updated application and a potential renewal process with the associated timeframes and some fees. So what staff is solely focusing on is the courses themselves, not the entire continuing education program. And what would be coming back to the committee would be some different options of language, so that way the committee can discuss and see language with different scenarios to hopefully make a decision at either the December or the January meeting and bring back to the board. So we're not going all the way back to the beginning. We're just, staff is just trying to be cognizant of some of the other kind of issues with continuing education that I think there's a regulatory solution for as well.
Well, I didn't mean to imply we're going back to the beginning, because I think we've made a lot of work, but essentially what we're doing is we're scrapping what was done in April, and we're just incorporating the new language that we've discussed in more recent CE committees and adopting that.
Yes, yeah, it'd be going back into the with all of the CE courses.
Right. The more comprehensive package we've already been working on. Okay. Well, it appears that the other members of the committee agree with staff, so that's what it'll be. Thank you for your clarification.
I believe that motion had not received a second. Can somebody clarify that for me?
This is Dr. Daniels. I'll second.
Thank you. Before I go to public comment, is there any further discussion from the board members? Hearing none, moderator, would you please open up this agenda item for public comment?
Certainly. If anyone has any comments to make about this agenda item, you may look for the question mark icon in the lower right corner, type the word comment and click send. The other option is to raise your hand by clicking on the hand icon, and our call-in users can use *3 to raise their hand. We do have one request for comment from someone logged into WebEx as Marcus Strutz. And Marcus, I'm going to send you a request, unmute your microphone, and you'll have 3 minutes to speak. And you're unmuted.
I think I've spoken enough where you guys know I'm extraordinarily disappointed in the slowness of the process. We're talking January 20th, December 6th. It's October 27th. We started this 2.5 years ago, where we started pushing on this and had former board members pushing against it and This is going on and on and on and on. The hardship for the providers is extraordinary, and it doesn't seem like that's an issue. I'm extraordinarily disappointed in the slowness of this process, and I can't understand why we can't have a meeting 10 days from now and get this done. This should be a pretty simple thing. I would love to be invited to help with the board folks who are writing this up for clarity on this. I'm listening and listening and listening. Just there's a lot of misinformation or lack of understanding what happens behind the scenes for the CE providers who then work with the board and all this other stuff that's happening. That conflict of the board thing was evident 2 years ago, and it never came up. And that's one of the reasons was I was not allowed to talk by the former president of the board, which doesn't seem right either. So very disappointed, but I understand the idea of putting it together, but I still would like clarification of we're trying to do Zoom with the fee structure and the renewal process all at once, or is it the entire package with all the competencies coming down the line? I think it's the first, but thank you for your time.
Thank you for your comments.
And I do not see any other requests for public comment at this time. Shall I close the public comment feature?
Yes, please. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I would ask Mr. Sweet to please call the roll for the vote on the motion.
Dr. Paris,
Yes.
Dr. Adams, Dr. Adams,
No.
Fellow Sweet, yes. Ms. Cruz,
Yes.
Dr. Daniels,
Yes.
Thank you. Motion passes. Okay, if we go, can we go back to agenda item 17? Enforcement Committee report, and Dr. Adams, will you please provide an update?
Yes, thank you. On October 6th, 2022, Dr. Paris, myself, and Mr. Sweet attended our Enforcement Committee meeting. We discussed proposed language changes to the record-keeping requirements for chiropractic patient records. We as a committee directed the staff to work with the Regulatory Legal Counsel to draft proposed language to amend Title 16 of the Chiropractic Code of Regulations, Section 318, to address these issues and referred back for a future meeting. The committee also designated Dr. Paris to assist staff with the technical review of the proposed changes to ensure they are appropriate for all areas of chiropractic practice and consistent with the standards of care. We also discussed proposed changes to the board's disciplinary guidelines and model disciplinary orders and implementation of the uniform standards for substance abuse licensees. The committee reviewed and discussed these issues and directed staff to deal with some other language. We also wanted to have some clarification on probationary, existing terms. So we have some bullet points here. We discussed adding a new standards condition of probation, requiring probationer to maintain a current and active license, reimburse the board for its probationary monitoring costs, and then to be practicing a minimum of 20 hours a week while on probation. They can't serve as a continuing education instructor if they're on probation by the board, and then they need to give current contact information. We also discussed adding new optional conditions for probation. That meaning, we discussed the idea that if people have been, had their license revoked, and say it's been 10 years, and right now the requirement is essentially that they just update all their continuing education that they hadn't taken for those 10 years, and then petition the board and show rehabilitation. They're getting their license back and can practice, with some probationary, constraints and aspects, but that their license is in full. And one of our concerns was, whether their skill set is up to snuff, their diagnostic, their adjustive skills, and other aspects that relate to, the practice of chiropractic. So we discussed the possibility of adding Part 4s for individuals that may have gone beyond a certain point, 5 years or 4 years, we'll discuss that further. So the staff's been directed to deal with some language on those aspects. And I think what we discussed earlier was the issue of repeating the same courses when we see people that haven't been in, had their license revoked, haven't been in practice, and they're repeating similar or same courses, within days of each other. So that I think has already been handled and discussed previously. So we're in accordance with that. So we've directed the staff to incorporate the committee's discussion and feedback on the probation terms and conditions into proposed language to amend to the board's disciplinary guidelines, which will present to the committee at a future time. We also discussed the disciplinary decisions involving sexual contact with patient and required actions against sex offenders. So we reviewed some of those aspects and about certain people that, that the level of their offense, and having to register as a sex offender and the causes for that. And so we had some discussion about levels or tiers of what that would be. That not everybody's all in the same category that has to register as a sex offender. Some people have more egregious tiered level offenses than others. And so giving some direction about that. So we've directed the staff to gather information on similar regulations by other healing arts programs and registration requirements relative to their sexual misconduct aspects. And that kind of brings it up. Ms. Walker, if you wanted to clarify anything or add any additional comment, that would be great.
Thank you, Dr. You summarized the discussion very well. Like we said, there was discussion by the enforcement committee on a number of the pending regulations, and now it's with staff to update some language and bring back some different samples for the committee to discuss at the next meeting in December.
Thank you. Any comments from those that were in attendance, Mr. Sweet or Dr. Paris?
No, I think that was a good summary, and I think you covered everything we've been working on. Thank you.
Thank you. And that's my report. Thank you for your time.
Is there any further discussion or comments from the board members?
I was wondering, Dr. Adams, on the proposed regulations involving sexual contact, any discussion around that had come up around some of the concerns from one of the attachments that we got? I guess maybe a more...
I'm not familiar with what attachment.
Okay. Was there more conversation on the disciplinary actions around sexual contact, as far as you had mentioned the tiers, but as far as education, retraining, how it's investigated or controlled?
There wasn't, as I recall, a specific discussion about that. It was more about the importance of them disclosing, and then the registering, and then the specific aspects of the Consumer Protection Enforcement Initiative that was approved by us on August 29th. So we wanted to, basically, our perspective is that we wanted to be able to retain as a board some discretion about what we would impose as probationary standards for that person, depending on the tier or the level of offense that they committed. I brought up an example of a doctor that I knew that had become intoxicated. He reported to me that he had to register as a sex offender because he became intoxicated at a he was at a outside event all the bathrooms were being taken, and he wandered over to a bush because he was behind in a line and to relieve himself, and didn't realize that on the other side of the bush was a minor league or a little league game happening, and somebody observed him and assumed that he was exposing himself to children. So it was a misunderstanding. He ended up pleading it out, and so that's a tier that's just like an example of a tier that we talked about versus somebody that's been convicted of a serious high level misdemeanor or even a felony charge. And our discretion as a board as to what should be reported or imposed on that person compared to the other, as opposed to just a blanket. Anybody that's a sex offender falls into that category or has to register. Did I capture that, Ms. Walker?
You did. And just to clarify, I believe, Dr. Daniels, you're referring to a public comment that we received relating to enforcement. That comment was received after that enforcement committee was held, and the plan is to address that public comment through the next enforcement committee agenda.
Thank you. Yeah, I thought it was received after. I just was wondering maybe if the board had already was addressed some of those aspects just in their conversation. If
one related item that was discussed during the enforcement committee meeting under the disciplinary guidelines was the strengthening the chaperone requirements within those guidelines. So that is one item that kind of relates, but and was discussed at that meeting, is how to strengthen the existing requirement for when a chaperone has to be present, ensuring that they understand their role and that they're present and that they're attesting that they were there by signing the patient record.
Okay, thank you.
I have nothing further. We can open for public comment if you'd like.
Thank you, Dr. Adams. Moderator, can we please open agenda item 17 for public comment?
Certainly. If anyone has a comment about the enforcement committee report, you may look for the question mark icon in the lower right corner, type the word comment in the text box and click send, or you may push the hand icon to raise your hand. And if any call-in user would like to comment, they may raise their hand by pressing *3. Each person will have 3 minutes to speak. And we have a request to comment from someone logged into WebEx as ML. I'm going to send you a request to unmute your microphone. You're unmuted.
Hi, I'm just following up on what Dr. Daniels said. I may have been the one who submitted that public comment that was done after the last enforcement meeting, and I do plan to be at the next enforcement meeting. But part of the chaperoning that my question is about is chaperoning after you find out a licensee is under investigation for potential misconduct, and how patients can still be harmed while your investigation is ongoing. And you have currently that I've seen nothing in place to protect patients and consumers while your investigation's ongoing. So, and this, I'm happy to discuss this at a later date as well.
And I see no further requests for public comment at this time. Shall I close the Q&A?
Yes, please.
Thank you.
And thank you for those comments. And I would just reiterate, we appreciate those and it's valuable feedback. And we're just unable to respond to items that are not on the agenda, but we appreciate your comments. And for any items that require follow-up, the executive officer will gladly reach out to any of the public commenters here today or anytime. Okay, so we were out of order there. We went out of agenda item order. And so we'll go back to agenda item 19. And I believe Ms. Walker will provide us with provide the board with an update on the implementation of SB 1434, our sunset bill.
Sure. Yes, thank you. So our sunset bill, Senate Bill 1434, passed the legislature on August 29th, and then it was signed by Governor Newsom on September 27th of this year. It does become effective January 1st of 2023. We briefly wanted to just summarize for the board kind of the actions that we're taking at this point to implement the bill. This agenda item is really informational only, and we're not requesting any action by the board. What this bill does is it extends our sunset review date by 4 years, which is what we were seeking through the sunset process. During sunset, you can get called back within a year or two, or you can get extended out to 4 years. We did get the 4-year extension, which is what we were seeking. As far as implementation, really what at this point, staff is going to be working with the board's committees to address the various issues that were identified by the legislature through the 2022 sunset review. We're also going to be working with the Government and Public Affairs Committee on the preparation of the board's next report beginning in 2025. Another provision within the bill requires that the board include licensees' telephone numbers and email addresses in its directory of licensees, and licensees must immediately report changes in their contact information to the board. So for those licensees who are already utilizing the board's Connect system, they're already going to be in compliance with this requirement, given that they're able to provide their telephone number and email address to the board and update it in real time through their Connect account. We're also working with the department's Office of Information Services to include some information about this new requirement with the license renewal notifications that are being mailed to licensees' addresses of record. We're also going to be posting some information about it on the board's website and communicating to licensees through our listserv, and also trying to use our social media account to get the word out. What we plan to do is, after January of 2023, use various reports to track compliance so that we can kind of get a sense of how many licensees have filed this information with the board. And then as 2023 progresses, we can have some more targeted kind of messaging and mailing to licensees who have not yet provided that information that's required in the directory. In addition, this bill, it requires the submission of a report to the legislature by January 1st of 2027 that contains an update on the status of the board's license fee structure and whether the board needs to consider plans for restructuring its license fees. So with this, the date does correlate with the sunset review report. Staff is going to be working with the Government and Public Affairs Committee to closely monitor the board's budget and fund condition and really assess the impacts of the updated fee schedule, which we will begin seeing towards the end of this fiscal year and as we head into next fiscal year. From there, staff and the committee will begin developing recommendations on the topic for the board. It's really going to be an interactive process over the next few years as we prepare for the final report on that fee structure. As we're all aware, the Sunset Bill also updates the board's fee schedule. So included within the meeting materials is an attachment with those updated fees. Staff is working with the department's Office of Information Services to add these updated fee amounts to our CAS and Connect systems and our applications and our forms. And then we're also going to be posting this updated fee schedule on the website in November and communicating this information to all of our applicants, licensees, CE providers, and other stakeholders. And as I had noted during the continuing education call, with that fee increase becoming effective January 1st, we are working to get the word out to individuals and especially to continuing education providers to get their submissions in prior to that fee increase if they want to not have to pay the higher fee. So we will be accepting any applications for 2023 courses here at the end of the year to try to help alleviate some of those initial impacts. In addition to the fee increase, the board's bill also, it removes the previous exemptions for visits in urgent care facilities, unscheduled visits, and visits where the licensee treating the patient is not known to the patient until immediately prior to the start of the visit, from the patient notification requirement for licensees who have been placed on probation by the board. This really does significantly strengthen that patient notification requirement for licensees on probation by kind of eliminating what we had found to be some methods that they could use to avoid making that notification. And particularly in these types of circumstances, it really illustrates situations where patients don't really have the opportunity to check the licensee's background in advance. And instead, it's really imperative that the licensee notifies them directly that they're on probation. So with this aspect of it, our probation monitors are notifying the probationers of these changes so that we can ensure their compliance. And then staff is also working to make sure that each of the stipulated settlements that'll be going before the board after 2023 will include this updated language. And then also with the board's enforcement committee, there's the updates to the disciplinary guidelines, and we'll be incorporating this requirement into that language. Are there any questions from the board on the implementation of our sunset bill?
I just have one quick question. The update immediately was, you noted that they would be able in real time via Connect to do that. But did we define immediately? I hear that and I wonder what that means to us, like what our expectation would be.
So whenever in a statute you see the word immediately and it's not quite defined, it opens the door for the potential for a regulation to then define what that word means. With the whole filing of addresses issue is already being discussed by the licensing committee. So we're in a position where it can be implemented immediately, or it can go into effect on January 1st of 2023. But then as part of the licensing committee's work on all of the filing requirements and notification requirements to the board, we can further kind of refine that language through a regulation.
Okay, great. Thank you. I have no further questions. Are there any further questions or discussion from the board members? Hearing none, moderator, would you please open agenda item 19 for public comment?
Certainly, and we have opened up the Q&A feature of WebEx to facilitate public comment. And if you would like to make a comment on the possible implementation of the sunset review, you may look for the question mark in the lower right corner of your WebEx screen, type the word comment and click send, or raise your hand by clicking on the hand icon, and our call-in users can press *3 to raise their hand. Each person will be given 3 minutes to speak. And I do not see any requests for comment. Shall I close the public comment feature?
Yes, please. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, moving to agenda item 20. Review, discussion, and possible adoption of the 2022 to 2026 strategic plan. Ms. Walker, was staff or anyone from Solid going to kind of give a brief overview of this?
So we do have Ann Fisher here from Solid that can help facilitate the discussion of the draft strategic plan.
Ann, I didn't know if you were pulling double duty today or not, so thank you for that.
You're very welcome. I had not intended to present, but if you'd like me to, I can.
If you're willing, please. Thank you.
Certainly. All right. So we did meet with the board and put together a draft strategic plan. I have made some notes and edits and suggestions that the Executive Officer Walker has also approved. And so we are displaying it on the screen. We did address the appropriate goal areas, which were licensing and professional qualification, enforcement, public relations and outreach, laws and regulations, and organizational development. And we did come up with a number of objectives which can be tracked as the board accomplishes those. So we present the draft version for board approval.
Thank you. I would open it for any discussion or questions from the board.
I just want to commend Anne, and I can't remember who your compadre was that day, but did a great job in the strategic plan. Felt like you directed us very well and got us on task. So I think it looks great. I just want to, not that it's a big deal, but under the listies of the names, you have me listed as vice president. I don't know if that matters, if we need to keep it consistent as to the our language in our, I guess our board, we always use the term chair instead of president. So I just thought I would point that out. Not that it's a big deal, but vice chair versus vice president.
Thank you. I'll fix that.
Otherwise, I think it looks great. I think it captured what we discussed. Thank you for your efforts.
Absolutely. And I will pass on your comments to Elizabeth Coronel, my co-facilitator.
Thank her for us again.
Certainly.
Are we, I would edit non-substantial changes, things like that. Can we submit those even if we make a motion to adopt today? I don't imagine we have to run through those.
This is Sabina. Your motion can include the delegated authority to your executive officer to make any technical and non-substantive changes that she may come across during this process.
I was hoping Ms. Knight would have comments. Thank you.
Hope that helps.
That helps. Thank you, Sabina. Are there any other comments or questions from the board?
No, I'll make a motion that we adopt the strategic plan as outlined on this agenda item and give authority to the executive officer to make non-substance changes as deemed appropriate.
I would second that. Any comments or discussions from the board on the motion? Hearing none, moderator, can we please open this agenda item for public comment?
Certainly. And we've opened up WebEx's Q&A feature to facilitate public comment on the draft strategic plan. If you have a comment, you may look for the question mark icon, type the word comment and click send, or raise your hand by clicking on the hand icon, and our call-in users can press *3 to raise their hand. And I do not see any requests for public comment. Shall I close that feature?
Yes, please.
Thank you.
Mr. Sweet, would you please call the roll for the vote on the motion?
Yes. Dr. Paris?
Yes.
Dr. Adams?
Yes.
Kyle Sweet? Yes. Ms. Cruz?
Yes.
Dr. Daniels?
Yes.
Thank you very much. Motion passes. And once again, Ms. Fisher, thank you for all your assistance with that, and the board staff and the board members. That was I think we did a really good job there, and I'm particularly proud of that document. So thank you for all your hard work, everybody.
It was a pleasure to work with your group. You're all engaged and interested. That's wonderful.
Thank you for that. Moving to agenda item 21. election of board officers for 2023 nominations. And I believe, Sabina, were you going to run this?
I could absolutely help out. We're going to take these one at a time. We can take nominations for chair first. Let me remind you that you can nominate yourself. If you did not nominate yourself and someone else nominates you, I will also be asking if you accept such nomination, because we're not going to force anybody into service here. So and then after there is a nomination, which is really a motion, we'll have a second, and then we can go up for public comment, and then we'll repeat for each officer position.
I will nominate Dr. Paris for chair.
Dr. Paris, do you accept that?
Don't we usually go in order? I thought we usually went in order. Sorry.
Sorry, order of what?
There's a roll call.
Roll call.
It's in I believe it's in alphabetical order. It's
I don't even think we have a second yet, so I don't think we're even to a vote.
No, I think the roll call was, in the past, we've gone through to give each board member the opportunity to submit their nominations.
However you would like to do it. Go ahead.
Could we have the moderator display the roll call order for the nomination of board officers? Because we have a different than the normal roll call order. It goes in alphabetical order with the chair last, and then Sabina, you'll run through each one and see if they have a nomination for chair.
And this is the moderator to remind you, you may scroll down on that page displayed so that you can see the roll call order.
I see now. Got it. Thank you for letting me. I was waiting for the page to move. Sorry. Okay, so all right. I'm trying to wrap my head around the way you do this real quick. Okay, so Dr. Adams, do you have a nomination for chair?
Well, I concur with Mr. Sweet, and I nominate Dr. Paris to be chair.
Okay, Ms. Cruz?
I nominate Dr. Paris.
Dr. Daniels?
I nominate Dr. Paris.
Okay, so Dr. Paris, do you accept the nomination?
I would accept the nomination, and thank you for your confidence.
Then I will need a second.
I'll second. This is Dr. Daniels.
Thank you. And if there's no more discussion, then we'll go for public comment on this motion.
And this is the moderator, and we are open for public comment on the motion for president of the board. If you have a comment, you can look for the question mark icon, type comment and click send, or raise on the hand icon, or pressing *3 if you're a call-in member. And I see no comments. I will close that for the moment. Thank you.
Great, then we can call for the vote, Mr. Sweet.
Dr. Paris?
Yes.
Dr. Adams?
Yes.
Raphael Sweet, yes. Ms. Cruz?
Yes.
Dr. Daniels?
Yes.
Okay. I think we'd repeat that for vice chair.
Okay, sorry for my delay. I was trying to look at the agenda and how it's worded today. I was under the impression, since the agenda said elections, that we were electing officers today.
I believe this is just nominations. So I don't think we vote on it today. We vote on it at the January meeting.
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay, all right. Well, give me a moment here to figure out what we should do today, since it is agendized as elections. Let me review this really quick. Can we either take a few-minute break, or you just hold for a moment?
Why don't we give everybody 5 minutes? Is that okay this night?
Absolutely.
Okay, let's take, I have 12:18. Let's come back at 12:23 and we'll continue agenda item 21.
Hi, Sabina. This is Amanda. Would you like me to leave this screen up for you during the break, or can we go back to the slides?
The other slide's fine. I have it up too.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Is everybody back, Dr. Paris?
Let's see here. I'll just ask the board members to come on camera so we can see if everyone's back.
I never left you, Sabina.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
I think we are, so please feel free.
Okay, so the way it was agendized, it says elections. And so I thought we were running through elections. And I guess your elections have to occur in January. So that was an oversight on staff's end on the agenda. But what we're going to do is we're going to rescind that last election motion and just turn it into, that's going to be a nomination for chair. And then we'll just run through the last two for nominations, and then we'll have the official elections properly agendized in January. Does that sound like a plan?
Sure. Yeah.
Perfect. Perfect. Okay, so then we're moving on to vice chair. I believe it's your wording, right? So then we'll take our nominations. Dr. Adams.
I would like to continue as vice chair, if you'll have me.
Wonderful. Ms. Cruz?
Nominate Dr. Adams.
And Dr. Daniels?
Nominate Dr. Adams.
And Mr. Sweet?
I'll also nominate Dr. Adams.
And last but not least, Dr. Paris.
I would also nominate Dr. Adams.
Wonderful. And the last one would be secretary, Dr. Adams.
I would nominate Mr. Sweet if he wants to continue in that capacity.
Ms. Cruz?
I nominate Mr. Sweet as well.
Dr. Daniels?
Nominate Mr. Sweet as well.
Mr. Sweet, do you accept that?
I will accept those nominations, yes.
Wonderful. And Dr. Paris?
I would also nominate Mr. Sweet.
Wonderful. Thank you. And thank you for indulging me in my my moment trying to figure out our agenda. And so we'll bring back these nominations in January, and then obviously be open to further nominations at that time as well, but we will hold the official election then.
Great. Thank you. And thank you, Ms. Knight. And thank you for clarifying that for us also. Moderator, can we please open agenda item 21 for public comment?
Certainly. And if anyone has any comments on the nominations for board officers for 2023, you may look for the question mark icon, type the word comment and click send, or raise your hand by clicking on the hand icon. Each person will have 3 minutes to speak. And I see no requests for comment. Shall I close the public comment feature?
Yes, please. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Moving to agenda item number 22. Public comments for items not on the agenda. Members of the public, please be aware you may address the board at this time. Identifying yourself is voluntary, and your name will be recorded in the official minutes if it is provided at the time of your comment. And can we please open agenda item 22, public comment for items not on the agenda?
Certainly, and the Q&A is open. You can type the word comment and click send, or raise your hand by clicking on the hand icon. And I see no requests for addressing items not on the agenda. I can close that for the moment and then we'll move on.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Moving to agenda item 23, future agenda items. I would like to open this to the board for discussion of any future agenda items. Hearing no comment or discussion from the board, moderator, can we please open future agenda items for public comment?
Certainly, if you have a suggestion of a future agenda item, you may use the Q&A feature, type the word comment and click send, or raise your hand. We do have one hand raised from a participant logged into the WebEx as ML. I'm going to send you a request to unmute your cell phone connection. You'll have 3 minutes. You're unmuted.
Longer because I just missed the public comment section. Hello board members and board staff. My name is Melanie, and prior to the meeting, I submitted comments via email under the initials ML. This is my first time speaking at one of your meetings. I was a complainant because of misconduct by one of your licensees. I'm here because I'm concerned the board is not doing enough to protect patients and consumers. I feel much more can be done to protect the public. So some of my comments are, sorry, I'm out of breath. Licensees continue to work with patients after license revocation. From what I've interpreted in board policies and regulations, it seems there is no differentiation between an unlicensed individual versus someone losing their license for being a risk to the public. In my case, the administrative law judge said in their decision and order, protection of the public requires the respondent's license to be revoked. I would like to know why someone like this gets to continue to work with patients. According to what I've read, they can do physical therapy, etc., with patients. How is this protecting patients if in an unlicensed capacity they can still do harm? My next question is, what is your oversight process when someone's license gets revoked to ensure they do not continue practicing? Do you have a meeting or checkout process with them after to go over with them what they can and cannot do according to your regulations? And once policy and regulatory changes are updated, how will a revoked licensee be informed? I was previously told by one of your enforcement analysts that you do not have a checkout process for revocation, but you do for probations. Why not have something similar for revocation? Is the board required by law or regulation to share information that arises in the investigation about a licensee with another governmental agency or consumer protection agency? Under what circumstance? And if the board discovers during their investigation potential wrongdoing or misconduct involving a licensee with another governmental or consumer protection agency, such as the medical board or the Department of Insurance, what are the rules and regulations of your board in sharing information with other boards or agencies, and how is this enforced? This is a couple of very important things. What is the board policy on making information about licensees' disciplinary actions available to the public? From auditing various licensees' profiles on your site, there are inconsistencies with which licensees' public documents are uploaded and when. According to your rules and regulations, what information?
30 seconds.
How is that enforced? Your present enforcement manager, Mr. William Walker, told me they do not post public documents, which I now know is incorrect information. Are there policies and guide how long an investigation should take? Why do your investigations and enforcement actions?
Melanie?
Yes, I'm sorry.
Melanie, I just want to let the moderator know you can slow down, and we're gonna let you finish your comments. And so,
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Take your time.
Okay, sorry, was I talking too fast?
No, you weren't talking too fast, but we were coming up on the 3-minute mark, and I didn't want you to get cut off. So I want to allow you as much time as you, as many more minutes as you need to finish your comments.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
So I said, are there policies that guide how long an investigation should take? Why do your investigations and enforcement actions take so long? Is it a matter of not enough staff? Does this board need more funding? What is the role of the public in your meetings? What are the policies for their participation? How can the public be more involved in your processes? I see that public comments during the board meetings are not scheduled for a specific time. It seems this discourages members of the public from speaking at these public hearings if they have to be expected to be at a meeting from 9 to 5 in order for their voice to be heard. Consumers have work. How can they be expected to be watching and paying attention to the meeting all day? It seems like there should be an approximate scheduled time that the board says, okay, we are now going to pause and take public comments, such as like today, they told me when I called the board, I asked when approximately would this agenda item be, and they said probably after lunch. Now I see that it's before lunch. And then I just want to comment on chaperones again. In my scenario, the board had already been investigating and knew of this former licensee's sexual misconduct even before I even started going to this former chiropractor. Had the board required them to have a chaperone, I may have been spared from what happened to me. How can you further protect patients and consumers from future instances where this happens? And I appreciate your time. If there's anything I said too fast, I did send in an email with 8 points that I think could be looked into. Thank you.
Thank you, Melanie. You raised some valuable points, and I appreciate your comments there. As you know, we cannot discuss or take action on any of these comments or proposed matters, but I can suggest that we move these forward to the appropriate committee agendas for discussion. So thank you for those. Is there any further public comment for future agenda items?
I do not see any further requests for public comment. Shall I close the public comment feature?
Yes, please. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, everybody. I want to thank the board, staff, and especially thank all of our licensees and public commenters today. We appreciate your attendance. We value your feedback. And for those, as it was acknowledged earlier, some of those we will have our executive officer or staff reach out to you individually, and for others we will look to agendize some of those items for future meetings. At this time, I would adjourn this meeting at 12:36 p.m.